Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to this episode of the Murder Part. Tonight we'll be looking at the case of Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. We'll start with the introductions. Jeff, I'll go to you.
Hey, my name's Jeff Pincin, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the states of Delaware and Pennsylvania. And I specialize in the treatment of OCD and other anxiety disorders. And if you stick around until the end, we will respond to comments and questions. And please leave a comment or question, and we may respond to it in future episodes. And if I wasn't a counselor, guys, what I really wanted to do was be a shoe print investigator. So when the shoe print left at a crime scene, I wanted to be the guy to come in and investigate it, see what it was all about, figure out what shoe it came from, all of that. It turns out that police departments and investigators, they already do that kind of thing. There's no one that specializes in that, which is very unfortunate. There's got to be a need somewhere. So given that knowledge, I had to settle and become a counselor.
Oh, that's tough. They hire experts for everything to testify in court. Why not? You can make a lot of money testifying in court about shoe print analysis.
I could be an expert in it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, too, I want to congratulate Mike. Mike recently got engaged.
I did.
So congratulations on that one, Mike.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. All right, Mike.
My name is Mike Smith. I'm also a licensed professional counselor of mental health in the state of Delaware. I specialize in narrative therapy and geek therapy, and I'm a self-styled expert in all things geek. And if I hadn't become a counselor, it's actually interesting you mentioned shoe tread stuff, because I was going to be a shoe designer.
Oh, there you go.
Like not just really specialized in the shoe treads though.
Oh,
because
right.
Those treads, they look really nifty.
Yeah,
like you
impressive.
Look at the bottom
right?
of any shoes, they're not just like you could just get away with some wavy lines and be like, fine, give you traction. But there's a lot of detail that goes into making those things look interesting and unique, and still offer traction.
So you could either be really good at it or just kind of phone it in and be like, all right, well, I'll put whatever down there. But you wanted to be really good at it.
I wanted to be really good at it.
Right.
The top of the shoe, yeah, that's fine. But, turns out there's no job for that.
Oh.
Like they just roll it in together and be like, okay, here you go. One guy does the whole shoe. They don't have treads that.
We could have done that like pre-grad school. We could have just gone in business together.
We could
right?
have. We could have.
Missed opportunity.
Yeah, I could have been the expert that you turn to when you're stumped by something.
There you go.
But turns out neither of us could go in that direction, so we just became counselors instead.
Another harsh outcome.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, Mike, with the engagement announcement, we were talking about this before recording. Elvis Presley, right? I think most people know who Elvis was, big star. Although, amazingly, many people don't. I made a video on him a while back, and I was surprised by the number of people that weren't really sure who he was.
Oh, wow.
He's been going a while.
Yeah. Well, it's just.
And by going, I mean went home.
Right, to the spacecraft. It's just amazing because, the longer you live, the more things kind of drop off into that realm.
Yeah.
Like I've talked about before, like older movies that I liked, I mention them and people won't recognize them. And even creeping up on what I would consider, I used to consider fairly recent movies like Forrest Gump or Jurassic Park. People are like, Jurassic what? What is that?
I saw Jurassic World.
Right.
No, the first one. Yeah, I saw the first Jurassic World.
Well, it really comes out with movies without a sequel like Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Where it's just alone in time. And either way, so Elvis Presley, Colonel Tom Parker was his manager. And I don't know if this came from him or not, but Elvis was told, I think it was when he was dating Priscilla Presley, right? They would get married eventually, as Priscilla Presley. He was told, don't reveal that information to the fans, right? Because they won't be interested anymore. So that's what occurred to me.
Simpsons did it too. Like the episode with the B Sharps.
That's right. That was a great episode.
Yeah, the manager told Homer, he's like, don't tell anybody you're married. Like, you got to be available. He's like, I'm sure Marge will be fine with that. And she's weeping on the bed.
So we're expecting views for the podcast to just steeply decline at this point.
Apparently.
Is that, yeah, okay.
I'm not expecting that, but they are.
That's what we learned from history, right?
That's right.
If it was good enough for Elvis, good
the
enough
parallel
for
to
us.
Elvis works with almost anything, right? Like, yeah.
I'm not Elvis.
All right. So Richard Ramirez, we'll get a summary in a minute, Jeff, but Richard Ramirez is an incredible case. I know I say that a lot of cases, like, because I'm amazed by a lot of cases. But Ramirez stands out even among the notorious serial killers. Right? He's really up there with the top killers in terms of interest and intrigue. Right? Gary Ridgway, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Richard Ramirez. Like, they're all together. Eileen Wuornos. Ramirez, I think, is almost in a category of his own. He has a lot of overlap with other serial killers, but there's some things that he did that very few have ever done.
Yeah.
The pattern of behavior is so irregular, and his criminal versatility is off the charts. Like, he would do anything to anybody at any time, with planning, without planning, high on drugs, not high. There just wasn't a time when this guy wouldn't offend. So, very different from like Gary Ridgway, who we covered. And sort of different from Ted Bundy, although Ted Bundy certainly had his moments where he became unhinged, like in the sorority house in Florida, his kind of final homicides. So yeah, Ramirez, really, really peculiar. And we see kind of toward the end of his journey, he had a massive following of women who were interested in him. Sort of like Elvis.
There you go. Many comparisons here.
Yeah. See, Elvis just works for just about every company. It's like a universal reference.
Elvis, by the way, is the king of rock and roll. Like one of the early artists to embrace rock and roll, as from an American standpoint. Post the Beatles.
He really did have a tremendous voice. I know a lot of people, they look back, it's easy to kind of look back at somebody's history, and Elvis did some bad things, and that came out later. But in terms of the vocal quality, if you look at the old videos of Elvis, even late in his career, or you could argue like post-career, essentially, his voice was amazing.
Yeah.
It really was.
I mean, it did change. There was a lot of lifting and covers, like songs that people think of as quintessential Elvis songs were actually covers of other of songs, especially songs from black artists that wouldn't have gotten play on radio if it hadn't been covered by a white artist.
Yeah.
Which is a shame and an indictment of the time and era that existed. But like Hound Dog, one of his most famous.
Big Mama Thornton, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Big Mama Thornton. And a great version, like her recorded version is amazing. Yeah. But he kind of sped it up, put his own flair to it, and his vocals were great.
Yeah, he really did have a gift for singing. As I understand it, it's been a while since I did that video, but he wasn't a songwriter.
No.
So, matter of fact, I think some people said he had a marked deficit in that area. So he needed to be supplied songs constantly to stay busy.
Yeah. That was one of the reasons why I did so many of those types of covers. Also, twinless twin, as they call it. Like he had a twin brother that died when he was either still in utero or shortly after they were born.
Right.
Yeah. So, amazing life, certainly. But maybe a topic for another video. Who knows?
Possibly. Possibly. Yeah. But Elvis was very famous. Had a lot of following. Apparently, Richard Ramirez had quite a bit of a following as well.
For different reasons.
For very different reasons.
But yet somehow we find a way to talk about both of them. Committed homicides, Elvis. Singer, Elvis. Okay. Popularity, Elvis.
Getting engaged, Elvis.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's like, we also brought Simpsons into it too. So.
Well, the B Sharps was one of the most incredible. For me, it's up there with Monorail. Like it's a classic. I think George Harrison was in at the end of that episode.
Really? Okay.
I believe so, yeah. But yeah, that was it wasn't only the humor, it was the actual singing. It was impressive.
Yeah, it was very impressive. They got a really good barbershop quartet thing going on. It was really nice.
I love it when they invented the name. Right. The whole routine with that was great.
I love how they trashed the Grammys too. They just trashed it.
Yeah, The Simpsons really does. Unlike Elvis, The Simpsons applies to almost everything.
Yeah.
In life, because they just have 30-something years, 33 years, 34 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a lot of history.
All right.
So let's get a summary of Ramirez.
Yeah. All right. So Richard Ramirez, born February 1960. I understand there's some debate about when he was actually born, but late February, I think, is agreed on. So born in 1960. And his upbringing does lend itself to kind of understanding some of the things we would later see. But so some potential abuse from his dad, or at least he witnessed abuse from his dad. And Richard would go on to display behavior that was not the best. So doing things, smoking marijuana early on, sleeping in cemeteries to escape his father's anger, things like that. Things that you would, at age 10, starting to smoke marijuana, you're like, okay, that's a bad idea. Sleeping in cemeteries, bad idea. Getting away from your dad's anger, okay, I understand that, but nonetheless.
Arguably a good idea.
Well, sure, yeah. So a lot of his early life, we could relate to his cousin Mike. His cousin Mike was
Not me. No relation.
Yeah, no relation. Right. His cousin Mike was in Vietnam and would show him pictures of things that he had done to women over there, things like that. Richard was also there when his cousin Mike shot his wife. Mike shot his wife. And Richard witnessed this, and from there, his cousin Mike would plead insanity to that and get sent to a mental institution. And we get the impression that Richard really looked up to Mike, right? He was somebody that he really took a lot of cues from, is what I understand from that. So Richard would go on to live with his sister, and my understanding is that his brother-in-law or the sister's boyfriend was kind of had some negative influence on Richard as well. So there's some that we know about those early years. Not a whole lot, I don't think, but things that you can start to piece things together and see kind of the decline of Richard Ramirez early on. And we'll go into, I'm sure, more details about that. So this takes us to the years that he was active as a serial killer. Now, this is as far as we know. He may have committed homicides prior to this, but these are the ones that we're aware of, the ones that have been proven, or at the very least that he's admitted to. So the first one, April 1984, is when he starts becoming active in this. And there were many of them, and we'll go through specifics with these, but April 1984 to August 1985. Now, it was interesting when he got caught in August of 1985. It was really a community effort, right? The community, somebody noticed it was him, because they had his picture out on the news by then, because they had got a match with fingerprints, and so they got a picture of him out there, because Richard had been in trouble before, so they had his fingerprint, on the database. So a picture of him, and so he was coming back from somewhere. He was on the bus, and people they knew him, right? They knew this face, and a pretty distinct face as well, right? He's a pretty distinct-looking guy. So people started to notice him. He tried to steal a few cars, and the community just came around and they probably would have beat him to death if the police hadn't come.
They did beat him severely.
Yeah.
He survived it because the cops showed up. But
to the point where he more or less just gave up, and it might have he had to. He couldn't go on with how badly he was getting beaten. But it really a citizen's effort there to bring him down. So of course he would be arrested. He would have the trial. I think it was 3 or 4 years later after he got arrested, and difficult, of course, to get jurors for that trial because it was just so well known who he was. He had such a background across the nation, or so known across the nation for the crimes that he committed. And like you said, Dr. Grande, just the variety of crimes and the variety of people that he would commit crimes against, and the inconsistencies with the crimes he would commit or wouldn't commit, or what he would do to those people or wouldn't do to those people, or leaving them alive or not. So really a lot of inconsistencies created a very difficult, it became very difficult for the investigators to see any kind of pattern and try to piece things together. So he would have the trial, of course, and be sentenced and have multiple life sentences. And then he would end up dying June 7th, 2013 from B-cell lymphoma. So he never actually received the death penalty or the effect of it, but ended up dying in prison. And Dr. Grande, you already mentioned it. He had a lot of female fans, women that were very interested in him, not only just in him as a person, but him as a partner. And he did end up getting married while he was in prison. He was on death row and ended up getting married in the prison. And the woman that he married was just, she said that was her dream, to marry Richard Ramirez. So, so really interesting. A lot of weird things going on here, for sure.
Yeah, it's such an unusual case. And I think, came along at a time when serial killers were just kind of getting popular in true crime, right? Ted Bundy had already been, come and gone. Mm-hmm. A few others already come and gone. And Ramirez came on the scene, and I think almost like he wanted to kind of up the whole game. Like he wanted to, like he's a performance artist, he was taken to extreme. Mm-hmm. He's like the Sam Kinison of serial killers. And he just really terrified Los Angeles for the entire time he was active. Yeah. It was a frenzy to catch him. And the police made a number of mistakes. Some of those are highlighted a little bit in the Netflix docuseries. Mm-hmm. It was The Hunt for the Night Stalker or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Right. I mean, he was active during a time where there were others in close proximity. Right. Like the Golden State Killer. Mm-hmm. That was also going on.
It wouldn't be caught till years later.
Yeah, he wouldn't be caught until, only a couple of years ago. Like he got away with it for almost 30 years.
He was essentially retired when they finally caught him.
And the Hillside Strangler was
Kenneth Bianchi.
Yeah, before?
It was just before that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Had some of the same investigators too. Yeah. Working on that case that did on this one.
So I mean that was a big thing going on in California, especially at the time.
What's interesting, if you look at somebody like Kenneth Bianchi, and I think it was Anthony Buono was his cousin, right? The Hillside Strangler was two people. They were very different than Ramirez, even though they operated in California. I remember there's one incident with Bianchi and his cousin where they approached, I forget the name of the celebrity, but they approached like the daughter of a celebrity. And one of their routines was to impersonate police officers. So they had like fake badges or whatever. And they're like, give me your license. This was kind of like they did, and then they get out of the car or whatever. And they saw who she was, and they're like, have a nice day. Right? Richard Ramirez just would have killed her. Mm-hmm.
Or tried to.
Right. Yeah, he was good at attempting. Yeah. Not as effective as completing.
He was amazing at attempting. He did complete quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was
murders, but there were several where he tried and failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's take a look here at the history of Ramirez.
I think more than any other serial killer too, like where he had attempted and then missed.
It's hard to think of one who failed as many times as Ramirez as a percentage. Mm-hmm. In smaller cases, absolutely. But in terms of like a major killer who accumulated a lot of murder, Ramirez failed quite a bit. He was erratic. Mm-hmm. And people failed to kill him quite a bit. Yeah. Like the victim who had a shotgun unloaded. Right. And it doesn't work if it's not loaded.
Yeah.
Well, it's surprising, too, given all the failures he had, that he made it that long, right? Mm-hmm. That he was able to continue doing that.
15 months he was gone.
And he had so many failures, people identifying his car, being able to identify him, of course, because he left a lot of the people alive. He didn't kill all of them. And so people were able to give a description of him, right? And he was very distinct things like how bad his breath was and how much he smelled and things like that. That doesn't apply to everyone, right? So it was pretty specific things. And for him to continue on that long, especially when they were able to trace him to that dentist office, and then arguably the biggest failure of the whole investigation.
That was horrendous.
That he was able to just keep on going, despite all these failures on both sides, is amazing.
Yeah. His bad teeth were such a cornerstone of his look and his breath. It's interesting. So as we're making this, it's been reported that it's possible that Brian Laundrie's remains have been located. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
We don't know yet.
But it seems
we know some of his items were found in proximity to human remains.
right, which doesn't look good for his survival. But in the hunt for, if this is the end of the hunt for Laundrie, which I'm going to guess it is, but we have to wait and see. We saw many reports, and Mike, you were talking about this before recording, many reports of people who were like 100% that was Brian Laundrie. Imagine making that ID through body odor, which is, one of the potentials they had here. It's
It's like I can see the lineup now. Like, number one, step forward. No, it's not him.
Smells too clean. Right?
I'm catching hints of soap.
They kind of did a similar thing with Brian Laundrie, though, too, when he was hitchhiking. He would get in the person's car and be like, he just smelled too good, but he said he had been camping for days or weeks or whatever it was. So they kind of, smell is surprisingly common in looking for somebody.
We need to start thinking past the visual elements with criminals. Like you have your sketch artist, then you have your book of smells.
It's the scratch and sniff investigator book.
Make it fun. Make it fun for the public.
Make it interactive for all the senses.
Every major TV event now related to true crime is going to have a scratch and sniff
Smell-o-vision.
thing. Like, get this at your nearest Wawa, or anywhere else in the country, whatever else you have that's not Wawa. But get this at your nearest Wawa or grocery store. Scratch and sniff, Night Stalker TV.
Ooh, that's a bad idea. Bad idea.
Yeah, odor technology is it's far behind.
It is. Yes, yeah.
In criminology. Right?
Yeah. We've got everywhere. Like we've got some great, except in markers. Markers have the odor technology in markers is stupendous. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. But yeah, we've got video that is so clear that you can see every detail. You got audio stuff that is realistic, not smell.
No, it lags behind. Yeah. As a side, in the world of mental health, you do stumble upon situations sometimes with a lot of body odor, right? In certain types of agencies more so than others, right? Like agencies that have a larger homeless population, sometimes drug addicted, people come in. And one of the things that counselors don't always think of a lot of different angles. They're a little monolithic in thought sometimes on criticisms of the profession. Safety is one thing we've talked about that counselors do not think about enough.
Yeah.
And ventilation. Ventilation doesn't seem important until you really need it.
Yeah.
And I've seen situations where, especially newer counselors have been caught with a kind of a client they didn't expect, and they weren't familiar with the body odor, and they literally vomit, they run out of their office and vomit because it was that bad. Wow. And they didn't want to say anything. Right. Because again, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. So you just kind of oh, tell me more. Or how does that make you feel? Or all the stereotypical lines. But you're dying from the smell. So I'd always tell the supervisees, you just got to say something. If you're experiencing it, it's okay to say. You don't have to be mean. I wouldn't recommend that. But you can say, I'm detecting something. I'm getting a little sick. I'm not any good to you if I'm not paying attention. And maybe move to an outdoor venue or a better ventilated room.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That might be someone, hey, sorry, I can only see through video.
Well, these
no
days...
smells involved.
Yeah, these days, of course, if smell-o-vision makes it over to Zoom, then...
then you're in trouble.
Then you're in real trouble. Ooh, real trouble. I remember when I was in inpatient, we had a lot of issues with that. But I was lucky. My office was actually fairly open. It was in the basement of a barn that had been converted.
That sounds open.
My office was pretty open, very long and wide. Most of the other offices, though, were very small because they were upstairs in the barn and kind of compact. And right next to where I was a shelf that had been built into the wall. And so I kept things on that shelf, including a fan. Because one, for smells, too, because like in the summertime, the air conditioner didn't work very well. So I had this fan. I just turn it on and leave it on, and it would just, be a nice place where it could blow a breeze on me while I'm working. But it was great to be able to just kind of angle it slightly, to blow the air that way away from me on some of those occasions. When I didn't have to say much other than, okay, once we get into it, it's like, okay, so what are some of the issues you have with taking care of hygiene?
Yeah. Well, certainly, you think about it, it's going to impact their relationships. If somebody has an odor that's so strong that you can't tolerate it without vomiting, how many positive interactions are they going to have in the community? So it's definitely worth addressing. Also, there's probably a safety issue, like at some point, like infections and whatever else.
That's a good way to bring it up, Mike, because you're phrasing it, you're presenting it as something that everyone potentially lives with, and maybe especially inpatient. Like they're there, and is this something that you're doing okay with? Because you're living here, and is there anything I can help you with? Like, can people provide you with whatever you might need?
Is it a matter of not having soap or body wash? Is it a matter of no shampoo? Like what is the issue that we can get in the way? Is it a matter of not being comfortable in the area, because that can be an issue in an inpatient place. So bringing it up like that tended to be easier than "you stink."
Right. Yeah. There's definitely a direct way that's not as helpful.
Definitely not a way that I would have approached that.
And I'd make the same argument about vomiting. Like, how does that make the client feel? Like you were trying not to say anything, and then you run out of the office, and of course, you have to do it. You have to do it.
Excuse me, I'll be right back.
It's not nothing to do with your smell. No.
I'm sorry they can tell at that point. Like, excuse me?
That's one way to communicate it, I guess.
I suppose, but I'd be a little bit more tact than that.
I have heard cases as well of individuals with olfactory hallucinations. Not very common at all. I mean, I'd say like maybe I've heard of it twice. Really, in all honesty, we've talked about like different movies that don't represent hallucinations well. I work with a lot of people with delusions, psychosis from many sources: schizophrenia, major mood disorders, delusional disorder, brief psychotic disorder, drug-induced. Usually, auditory are a lot more dominant, in my experience, than detailed visual. Visual is often like shadows or like colors, things like that. Not like A Beautiful Mind, where there was fully formed, like John Harris or Ed Harris. Ed Harris was the actor. Yeah. Fully formed Ed Harris, and clear and detailed. That's
fully formed roommates. And
I mean, to be fair, Ed Harris doesn't usually appear fully formed in real life.
He's been in some good movies.
He has been. I joke, I jest a bit with Ed Harris. He actually is a pretty good actor. I like him.
Yeah, he's a little bit underrated, I think.
And Paul Bettany was in that movie too.
That's right.
Yeah. He played the roommate that Jeff just mentioned.
Yeah. So when people describe hallucinations, like they're like a shadow is running on the floor, that's what I'm used to hearing. That's kind of like okay, or a light they can't quite explain out of the corner of their vision. Like I saw that flashing. But auditory hallucinations can be very detailed and extensive.
Sometimes those hallucinations can be like typical things you would normally see, just out of context. Like, client at one point swore that they were gaining messages from the Almighty through a duck, and swore that the duck's mouth would move to the message that was being delivered. Right. And that, because that was the hallucination. Like the duck's mouth wasn't, it was just making quack noises, but it was talking to him. Like, and that's something that's, can be typical in those auditory or those visual hallucinations, because it just goes along with what you're actually seeing.
It's congruent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bugs seem to be pretty popular too. I've seen a few situations where, especially with a client you're not familiar with, when they're talking about the bugs, like on their skin, coming out of their skin, and when they first start to discuss it, they can be very convincing. I've noticed this a few times, specifically with the bug hallucination. And maybe that's because everybody is creeped out by the idea of bugs being all over them. You think, oh, maybe they are getting bit by bugs. And then you get deeper in the story, and you find mania and cocaine, and you're oh, okay, that's what we're yeah.
That one can be, I think, kind of relatable too, because we all have instances where like maybe we see a bug and we're like, oh god, you get kind of itchy, whatever, So maybe that one's a little bit more relatable, but then go more deeper and you're like, yeah, no, can't relate to that one.
We also have just about everybody I've ever talked to has had a situation where like they've fallen asleep on their arm and wake up with dead arm. It's just like, come on, wake up. And then as slowly the feeling starts to come back is that tingly sensation that goes up. And like very often when people talk about that bug sensation, that's kind of what they're talking about to me. Of course, most of the experience I have with that is with like delirium tremens, like the DTs from alcohol, which literally is those nerve endings waking back up after being, shut down for so long because of the alcohol. Mm-hmm. But that tends to be kind of that stimulation, that kind of stimulant.
Yeah.
DTs are not only painful, but they're scary for people. Yeah, it's a frightening process.
Potentially deadly when it comes to seizures.
Yeah. Unfortunately, alcohol claims a lot of people through that mechanism.
Yeah. I mean, no one's ever died from heroin withdrawal. They may wish they had.
It's very painful.
It can be very, very, very bad, but it's not a mechanism that will kill someone. Some people have unfortunately committed suicide because of it,
or other medical problems that
exacerbated by it. But the actual withdrawal itself has from heroin or opioids has not killed anyone. The same cannot be true said for alcohol. Alcohol is far more dangerous to come off of.
Yeah, and yet people do sometimes. Well, I remember during we're still in the pandemic as we're making this, the never-ending pandemic, but there were people who were complaining about the alcohol or liquor stores staying open. You're like, why can they stay open? Because everything's being shut down with the.
They're essential.
Yeah, it's really just to prevent people from dying. That was it wasn't for enjoyment. Like you weren't supposed to go out and get alcohol for recreation. It was supposed to be people who really needed it.
And that was, I think, our Delaware's governor made that point when he said, liquor stores can stay open because otherwise people will die. Mm-hmm. Because the coming off of alcohol is so dangerous.
Yeah, we just don't have the. Some people say, well, why just give them medical care and detox them all? We don't have the resources for that. Yeah. And that's assuming they'd all be like, okay, I'm ready to stop a lifetime of alcohol use.
Right.
Doesn't work that way. All right. So looking at the history of Ramirez, right? You mentioned his unusual birthday. There is some debate over when he was born. February 29 is one date that's thrown out there, which is notable. Mm-hmm. It's the rarest birthday, a leap day, for a very rare type of killer. Usually we don't get information about in utero experiences, but his mother may have been exposed to toxic chemicals. Could explain something.
Yeah.
When she was pregnant. A dresser fell on his head. Head injuries are very popular with serial killers. All the rage these days. And back then.
Or those days.
Those days. Dresser fell on his head. He was knocked unconscious for 15 minutes. And he had 30 stitches. That was 62. In 65, hit in the head with a swing. Again, knocked unconscious. A year later, started having seizures and diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. So not good. During the same year, this is 66, he saw his father mistreat his oldest brother in a physical way. And 1969, this is when he was first described as a loner. So up until then, a lot of head injuries, but no mood irregularities. Mm-hmm. And loner's not a good sign.
So at 9 years old, he was described as a loner, mm-hmm. which is not... at 9 years old, you're generally, not every kid, of course, but you're pretty social. It's time of exploration, I guess, and you're trying to figure out what the world's like and everything. You're kind of open to experiences, generally speaking. But so, of course, to be considered a loner, it perhaps is pretty pronounced, for someone to recognize that mm-hmm. About somebody else, perhaps. I'm just speculating there.
Yeah, because that's different than shy.
Yeah.
Loner has a connotation where somebody's really actively engaging perhaps in fantasy by themselves off in a corner, and don't need interaction, don't want interaction.
We talked just about alcohol. His father was a heavy drinker.
Yeah.
Heavy drinker.
Well, it's amazing with Ramirez. He started using marijuana in 1970 at age 10.
That's not the youngest I've ever heard.
No, but that's pretty bad, especially for back then. Yeah, it seems like things are worse these days with the younger ages being represented. I don't know why that would be. Or maybe we just didn't hear the stories from back then as much.
We might not have heard the stories back then. When we were doing research when I was in grad school, one of the outliers we got was 8 years old.
8, yeah.
8 years old when they started drinking.
I think the average was average start initiation age was like 15.
15.
Yeah. And you kind of look at like the most represented, it went down to like 11 and like up to 19. Like that was the popular range.
I'll always remember the two outliers because it was 8 years old, started with alcohol, and 24 years old, started with heroin. That one was...
Yeah, that's very unusual.
That is incredibly unusual. Most people start with any substance much, much earlier in life.
Mm-hmm.
And usually with something a little bit less, a little bit less than heroin.
Yeah, alcohol, marijuana.
We found that was alcohol and marijuana was the big ones people started with. Mm-hmm. And like something like 70% was alcohol, marijuana, or a combination of the two in the same event.
Alcohol really is a plague. Yeah. It really is. I mean, I know people can enjoy it recreationally, and that's fine. But when it's misused, it's a plague. It's horrible. And it's attached. It's behind the scenes, not so subtly, in most major catastrophes. Right? In people's lives and working in counseling,
right,
like looking for things that go wrong, there's alcohol peeking from behind them. Yeah, I'm here again. Guess who?
With the fact that so many more people in the United States drink alcohol than use things like opioid pills, it actually kills way more people. And even percentage-wise, the percentage of people killed by alcohol, directly and indirectly. Like drunk drivers tend to survive the accidents that they're in, but other people don't. Mm-hmm. But that's directly related to the amount of alcohol that was consumed.
Now, this is something I saw in the paper the other day, or online the other day. It's an allegation. No one's been convicted. But there was an accident, I think it was yesterday, where somebody in an MG, now that's a small car, but was hit by a Ford F-150, it looked like from the picture. It was rolled over, but I think it was an F-150. And so the size difference could explain some of it, but the guy in the MG died. And the guy in the F-150 allegedly fled the scene and was brought back, and they said he was intoxicated. Who knows with what, but alcohol is a popular choice, right, a common choice. And there's so many examples of that where, I think people tend to forget about that. Like, what about that guy in the MG? He was 50, I think he was 51. Not that it matters, but, 51 years old. It doesn't matter how old he is. He's dead for no reason. For no reason. Right. He was stopped at a traffic light, and somebody else chose to be very irresponsible. And that's it. Like, his story is not getting written anymore. Mm-hmm. And there'll be some outrage. The guy will probably go to jail for, in Delaware, I'm thinking 8 years. So, based on the other cases we've seen. Right. Probably when it all boils down, when we get his story about how terrible his life was or whatever, the defense, of course, always gets its churn, which is fair enough. It'll probably be 8 years, out in 6.
And he'll go through some of the programs in the prison system that are designed to help people get clean, which are terrible and terribly run, don't work because they don't have the funding. I've known some of the people who've worked in those programs, and they're very hardworking, very knowledgeable, very wonderful, empathic people. But they've all even said it's a terrible program because there's nothing we can do about it.
And even though there are some good clinicians in there, the reality is that's a job as a clinician that you take because you can't get something else. And when you get something else, you're gone. Yeah. It's not a place many people hang out. Although I have seen a few that just, they love the work.
Yeah. There are a few who love the work, but some of those programs in prison are actually run by the prisoners. Mm-hmm. They're run by the people, kind of like, we run AA meetings and we run this or run that. And it's all like very much honor system, follow the rules, and you get evaluated and you get out of the program.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of the mentality of making everything a felony. I feel like that's a knee jerk, like that we've used way too much. Like if something happens, lawmakers are like, make it a felony. That'll help. But I have to agree with Canada when it comes to DUI. First offense is a felony. It makes sense because the consequence can be some guy getting killed.
Right.
For nothing.
Right.
For nothing.
Right.
And completely innocent.
And sometimes that first DUI is that person getting killed.
Right. And sometimes the first DUI is the 200th offense.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, felony is it's a serious charge. It stays with somebody for life. And we've debated all that before. But I think just to drive home that we're done with it. We're done with DUI. Something's got to happen. Maybe it's felony plus more funding for mental health, especially substance use.
I'd love to see that. It's not going to happen.
No. I imagine. So you're talking about the people who run these programs or teach in these programs, and the turnover rate. I imagine, and maybe you guys have more experience with this than I do, but I imagine that they probably see a lot of the same people coming through those programs. The same offenders time and time again. And I imagine that just, if anything's going to lead to burnout, I imagine it's probably just you were here before and nothing changed. And that's certainly not necessarily a reflection of the person teaching that class, but I imagine that's easy to feel that way. Like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress in anything. And it's not their fault necessarily, but I'm sure it's easy to feel that way. If you don't feel like you're making any progress or making a difference, well, yeah, no wonder you'd want to go somewhere else where you might feel like you're actually making a difference, doing something legitimate,
Yeah, well,
it's a shame that it's like that.
The theory of motivational interviewing, right, is a popular theory in mental health. It's supposed to be brief only. Mm-hmm. Like MI shouldn't be more than, I think it's 5 or 7 sessions. That's it.
Very quick.
Yeah, the people who designed it said if you use it longer than that, you've missed the point of how it works. But essentially, I'm simplifying it a lot. It's actually sort of not too complex, but there's some elements to it. But the idea is that people change when they're ready. And it's about getting them at the time when they're ready, not about making them. Now, there's some other things, like I said, there's some ambivalence and stuff to try to explore that. But essentially, it boils down to people that use substances excessively have to be ready to change when they come to you. And we see things with DUI where people have 13, 16 DUIs. Like you're working on a calculator and like, I can't figure out how you can't be in prison. Like you have so many, and look at the minimum sentences, but they go in different states.
It's like there's sometimes like you're like, okay, if you were stealing handbags from a department store and you got caught 13, 14 times, they'd put you away for a long time.
It's a felony theft scheme.
Yeah. DUIs, nothing.
Mm-mm. Well, because one might get reduced, another one might get dismissed. You can go through a program for first offenders in one state, then another state, and people can go through this whole pattern where 20, 30, 40 years into their alcohol consumption career, they've accumulated in the teens as far as convictions. I fail to understand the utility of something like that being free.
I'm big time into treatment of drug and alcohol. A lot of my early work in the field was based in drug and alcohol counseling, and I'm still a big proponent of it. They're underfunded. Absolutely. Like every drug and alcohol program is underfunded. There's this sense of like, oh, we can get these people help and then they'll be better. Sometimes they won't. And like you said, with motivational interviewing, the thing we realize is people are not going to change until they're ready to change, until they want to change. Like the stages of change is a big thing in drug and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Well, and insurance companies love to see that in notes.
Pre-contemplative.
Oh yes, we got to use it. There's the stage of change: pre-contemplative, contemplative, planning, action, maintenance, which then comes back around to pre-contemplative. I always talk to people about it like you're getting a haircut. Like first you don't think you need a haircut, and then you realize, hey, I need to get a haircut, and then you figure out where you're going to go get your haircut. Then you get the haircut, then you got to keep brushing it, and then eventually it grows out, and you have to start all over again.
It's a good analogy for it.
It's a great analogy for it. And people finally like, oh, okay, I understand that now. Like 99% of people come into rehabs get labeled pre-contemplative because that just means that they don't realize that they need to change. Most people do. Some people, by the time I was told by one of my supervisors, like your whole goal in rehab isn't to get someone to, through to the maintenance stage to get them done. Your whole goal is to get them to go from pre-contemplative to contemplative. Get them to go from, I don't have a problem to, I might have a problem.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's where rehabs end. And then the person needs to go out there into the world and find a counselor, find some aftercare, which is the primary job of counselors, is to make sure that somebody has aftercare set up. It's like get them to that contemplative stage, and then send them out with a plan for what they're going to do to continue their journey. And unfortunately, we can't track where they're going, what they're doing, and make them do it. So many times you see frequent flyers, as Jeff mentioned, you get frequent flyers. I had one during my internship at Eagleville. I saw he was there during that internship for a good 90 days. Then he left. And I graduated and I moved into another rehab. Same guy. Mm-hmm. Saw him there and found out that was his 7th time at that rehab. He'd been at Eagleville for 5 times and been at other, he just rotated around a bunch of different rehabs.
Yeah.
Just taking a ride.
Yeah, sometimes people wonder why counselors just don't scream at clients and say, you need to stop drinking. And what some people don't realize is we tried that, not personally, but as a community, that's been attempted. It was called therapeutic community, TC. People would even use it as a verb, like, oh, he went all TC on that guy. And that meant yelling and screaming and telling people they were worthless and they need to stop drinking. That was the strategy. And I've met TC counselors who could go ballistic like that in a second.
I've met them too.
Yeah, so, and they're like, you know what? Your MI stuff, your cognitive stuff is nonsense. This works. Well, I don't know if any of it really works, unfortunately.
Does it? Does it really work? How many times have you seen that client that you yelled at?
How many times does he have to yell?
How many times have you yelled at him? Every time he comes in, it's not that it works, because nothing that we can do when a person is in that pre-contemplative stage works. The person has to want to change before they can change.
None of the strategies work.
It reminds me of
somebody has to want to get better.
It reminds me of an old joke. How many counselors does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change.
That's the truth of substance use, right? It's grim. You can have all the theories and all the well-trained practitioners, but they can't do anything because it's a belief system. Somebody's addicted. They don't believe that they have a problem. They don't believe they can change. They don't believe they should change. It's almost like Freud's unconscious mind, right? It's not in their awareness. It's not possible.
And we've been told for most of my life that drugs and alcohol are bad. And if you're doing a bad thing, you're a bad person. Mm-hmm. And we need to get away from the moral model of treatment. Addiction doesn't make somebody a bad person. You just got to treat them where they are.
Yeah, but I think we can contain the danger until they are ready to change. Yeah. Would be my argument, because innocent people get killed, and it's maddening.
Yeah.
But what we need to do is, in the state of Delaware, legalize the recreation use of marijuana, tax the crap out of it, and use all of that tax money to fund drug and alcohol programs.
It could work. I think marijuana is going to get legalized everywhere eventually anyway, so you might as well make money. All right, so yeah, Mike did have, Richard Ramirez did have a father who was caught in that cycle of addiction, and I think he had other people in his life too. I get this impression he was in an area where he was exposed to a lot of people with bad habits.
Well, his cousin was.
Oh, that's where I got the Mike from. Right. It's Mike.
Yeah, cousin Mike.
Yeah, his father Julian was definitely an alcoholic. His cousin, the decorated Green Beret, came back from Vietnam, would smoke and drink with Richard when he was 12 years old.
Yeah, and we see in 1973, so this is 13 years old, Mike he apparently literally took a .38 caliber revolver and shot his wife in the face at point blank range, and Richard watched. And it amazes me this could happen in Texas, and this guy was out in 77.
Well, he did plead insanity based on post-traumatic stress disorder. That the argument escalated to the point where he had a flashback was the claim, and jury, the courts accepted it, and he was put in a mental health facility, as Jeff mentioned. That's why he was out in 1977.
Yeah.
4 years of treatment and get out.
It's tough to believe. Texas has a reputation of being strict, but they've had, and falsely convicting people, but they also sometimes just let people go.
I wonder how much, and I really don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how much leniency was given to those who came back from the war. Not only Vietnam, but I guess you could say any war, World War One or Two, Korean War, anything. I wonder how much they took that into account. Obviously the PTSD thing, but like, all right, this guy served in a war, so he did something bad, of course, but we want to make sure we try to help him. We really can see where this might have come from, potentially, based on what they said in court. So I wonder how much of that really played into it versus somebody who maybe did the same exact thing, but also had a traumatic history, but wasn't in a war. I wonder if those two maybe identical situations, but with a different past, I wonder how they would have weighed those two. I'm curious to see. Obviously, we would never know, but
yeah, my impression from post World War II is that it was very unpopular to come back with symptoms, but at the same time, it was a very popular war, right? Like the United States, everybody in the United States wanted the bomb to be dropped in Japan. Right? People go back and try to rewrite that, but everybody wanted that because it ended the war. Two bombs actually were dropped, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and people were happy when the Eastern Front was done. The European theater was done, right? So yeah,
I was just saying, it's interesting that you mentioned the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There's one man known as the luckiest man in the world who survived both of those. He was in Hiroshima when the first one was dropped, and survived it, and left and went to Nagasaki, and was there when the second one was dropped, and survived that one too. The luckiest man in the world. And I think he's either still alive or just died of old age.
That's incredible. Yeah, they were devastating. I mean, they were devastating explosives. Right, it was horrible. And what happened in the European theater was devastating. Right, the bombing, even though it was conventional and not nuclear, it was incredible. Firestorms, it took whole cities. But the United States, and I can understand it, like trying to understand their perspective, everybody wanted that. So when the soldiers came home, they were heroes. Right. There was no question. But I think it was kind of a, somebody had PTSD symptoms. I think it was kind of a silent respect. Like, we're not going to call you out because we respect you so much, but we're not going to help you either because there's a stigma attached with mental health. I think they're stuck in that.
Well, at that time, they were calling it shell shock. I think that was holdover from World War One, or no, after World War II, it was combat fatigue.
Right.
So they're calling it, like, it was transitioning between. It was still a common term, shell shock, but they were going from shell shock to combat fatigue. Combat fatigue was huge during the Korean War, and then it was replaced with post-traumatic stress disorder during the Vietnam War. And I think with Texas being traditionally, historically, kind of more conservative, even I think in the 70s, the respect for soldiers would have been a little bit higher
that's good
there than in some, like in California.
Yeah, in Northern California would not have been a...
Northern California, it wouldn't have been like, well, that's no excuse. Like, it would have been, he'd have been thrown away. But I think that you're right, that may have played a role in, let's get this guy as a... he's a war hero. It's a decorated Green Beret. Like, he's a war hero. Like, let's get him the help that he needs instead of punishing him, sending him to prison.
Yeah, he might have been kind of like an intersection where post-traumatic stress was being understood, and in a place where Vietnam veterans were respected at that time. I think they're respected mostly everywhere now. But back then, it was much different. It was horrible how they were treated.
At the time, there were very few, especially people in the more educated communities, that were accepting of the war, and the people in the less educated communities were just seeing people being drafted and didn't like it either. So, you got one community that is saying we object to this on principle, and another going like, we just don't want to be sent over to die, and objecting all over the place. And there were so many protests about it. And it just depended on where you were in the country. And I think Texas may have been, especially in the area, may have been. I wasn't there. I'm not saying so. It's just my supposition. May have been in a case where they had enough respect for the soldier, especially special forces, Green Beret. You know, and I'm sure, I'm almost positive the term war hero was used during that time period.
Oh, yeah.
Except it was more like a war criminal.
Well,
Miguel was more like a war criminal.
right. Yeah. This specific
guy,
Yeah.
Miguel, Richard Ramirez's cousin, was more like a war criminal than a war hero. As he had Polaroids that he would show to Richard
of terrible things.
of terrible things that he did while he was in Vietnam.
Yeah. It was particularly graphic, and apparently Ramirez really connected with that material. Like, I picture his eyes lighting up and very engaged. Now, of course, he was also high on marijuana and probably other drugs by that time. So, terrible set of circumstances for Ramirez and a lot of the people in that area. Now, we see that around the same time, the exposure to the murder. So when Mike was in the hospital, his brother Ruben taught him how to open windows from the outside, pick locks, and disable alarm systems. I'm surprised there were that many alarm systems around back then, but
I think they were pretty easy to disable at that point too.
well, and talk about a lesson he learned.
Yeah,
Right?
Ruben was a peeping Tom. Like, he was doing it to try and catch women undressing or in a state or naked, and Richard just kind of went along with him on his nightly jaunts.
Yeah, he had no luck with role models.
No.
Well, eventually, when Mike got out of the institute, he would join Richard and Ruben circling the neighborhood,
So
making the rounds.
we see that after this, he gets promoted to burglary. He starts using cocaine, hallucinogens, and heroin. He starts going on dates with prostitutes, and he gets a job at 15 in a hotel. But he has a problem. He attacks a female guest, right? Attempts to assault her, and the woman's husband, I guess, either came back in the room or somehow encountered him, and apparently severely beat him. Like, Ramirez lost that hand-to-hand combat decidedly. But the couple, they were in a hotel, so they left, and they wouldn't come back to testify. Traveling was more difficult back then. But it was still, airplanes were pretty common still. They could have come back. And I think for the crime he committed, they should have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They got there the first time, right? So they missed an opportunity to...
They also probably, especially at that time, figured, he got what he got what he had coming. There's no need to send him to prison over it, because he didn't actually he didn't actually do anything, because he got stopped before he could, and got the crap beat out of him, and he's only 15, like, whatever. There's no reason for us to go back. That was a very common mentality.
That's a good point, especially with juvenile. They probably figured nothing would happen to him anyway.
Yeah.
And they might have been right. But I think it's still important with that particular charge to follow through.
Yeah. At that time, I don't think that was going to be unusual at that time.
He was still sent to a juvenile detention camp, but it didn't seem to help too much. So another story here with Ramirez I find interesting, a lot of people talk about this, is tooth decay. And you see these stories that ate too much candy. It was not restricted to that.
No, it wasn't just the candy and the soda. It was the fact that he never, ever brushed his teeth. Ever.
It's an important part of taking care of your teeth.
Yeah.
I don't think he even chewed like mint flavored gum. That was too close to brushing his teeth.
Yeah. He had no dental care plan whatsoever, strategy at all. And he did have quite a bit of candy, and apparently he was always drinking soda. So,
I'm glad. I keep a bag of little like Colgate Wisp things, little tiny toothbrush things in my car, just because like any moment I'm gonna be like, man, I need my teeth. Like, I'm out somewhere, I go to dinner, get out there and just after dinner mint, brushing my teeth there.
And you're in front of people all day too, and being outside of your house, like, you got to be prepared with stuff like that. Obviously not a concern of Richard's. He was also out of his house frequently, but didn't care too much about hygiene.
No.
No, and it would plague him for his whole life. That's where we see that later on that episode with the dentist. He was always going to the dentist because of the pain. I think that was the only thing that actually motivated him to get treated was pain.
I wonder what his dental insurance was like. Was it like
I don't think he had any.
homicide plan or something like that? Like,
What do serial killers get for that?
right? Is there like a special serial killer discount or something? Like,
Do they want the bad teeth look? Like, is that something that they
maybe that's part of the dental plan is you get to choose which look you get. Like, oh, you want the bad teeth look? We got you. All right, super cheap plan. We got you. We'll just take the pain away, keep the look. It's all right.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much it for him. Just pain. He just wanted that need satisfied.
Yeah, anytime he had an abscess or nerve got exposed, that's when he went to the dentist.
Yeah, it was always an emergent basis. Well, most of the time it was. So we see there that he has this tooth decay problem. He starts worshiping Satan at 18. So that's where we are with that. And 1978 through 84, he was arrested many more times for auto theft, burglary, possession of drugs. And then we move to his spree, right, which starts in the 80s. And 84 is suspected, right, was the first offense. We can just go through some of the highlights. He was involved in a lot of crimes here, but some themes emerged, right? One theme is that he did not care about age. Most serial killers have a very distinct and limited age range they're looking at. It's often like 15, 14, up to, say, 24, 26, something like that. For him, in the 80s was not a problem.
The first two that I have written down, first one, a 9-year-old girl, and then second one, I may be wrong on first or second, but 9-year-old girl, and then a 79-year-old woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's he proved his point, like in those two, that he had no specifics there.
I believe the 9-year-old was in San Francisco.
I don't have where, but
one of them was just recently tied to him.
Yeah. Okay.
By
DNA
right? Evidence. Yeah, it was right after he died. They tied it back to because they ran the DNA on that case and came back to Richard Ramirez. So they didn't know that was part of his before that.
I think it was suspected for a while. I think that's the April 10, 1984.
Yeah,
which is the first with an asterisk next to it. Like they didn't know. For a long time, it was June 28, 84, the 79-year-old victim. Everybody thought was the beginning of the spree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he also used an incredible variety of weapons. Sometimes he brought it with him, a .22 caliber pistol. I think he had a .25 caliber at one point as well.
The 25. See, that's the thing. When he switched up to the 25, they became less effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 25 is not a powerful cartridge.
22 is not either, but he did better with the 22.
Yeah, somehow he did better with 22. Yeah, I mean, 22 is definitely less powerful than 25. They're both pretty weak and a surprising choice for what he did. I guess he didn't like a lot of recoil. I don't know what the motivation. Cheap? Was it money?
Probably.
Does that have anything to do with size? I don't know the size compared to 22 and 25 versus other options.
There's tiny. They can be housed in a fairly small gun.
Yeah.
22 caliber is 0.22 inches, and 25 is 0.25 inches. So it's a quarter of an inch and just slightly smaller than quarter of an inch. Yeah. Is the diameter of the round.
Yeah. 22s are often conceptualized as practice weapons, sometimes like really small. You're hunting something really small or whatever, but it's usually paper punchers. But they're used in crimes quite a bit, which is, I think, just people like, oh, I have this gun. They don't realize it's a 22 or they don't care. And that's what they use.
It's still deadly.
Yeah. Well, especially to the head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he did use that strategy in his career. He also would use edged weapons like knives, his fists, strangle people. I think a telephone cord. He used.
That was the sparking one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where he thought he saw Jesus, or thought Jesus came back, and helped the victim out, or something like that. Caused him to run, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Told him. I guess he thought Jesus was communicating with him through that spark and warning him to give it up. He attacked people. So his basic strategy was to make entry into a house. And this time, in mid-'80s in Los Angeles, it was very hot this summer of '84. And I think as well in '85, I think both of them were warm. I think in the Netflix special, it definitely said '85 was warm.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, it would never be cool in the summer. You know, and people would often leave their windows open. Air conditioning wasn't abundant, and it was expensive. And even when they heard he was out there, they would still leave them open much of the time, which that part I don't get.
I guess at that point it's kind of like, well, either I keep the window closed and I just, sweat in here and just gets so unbearable, or I keep it. I remember there was one, maybe it was in the special, people had the window open, they were just like sitting there staring at the window. Like, you could come in here, but I still want the window open. I still want to feel some kind of airflow in here. So I guess at some point it just became a necessity for some people, maybe. But also they were very scared about it as well. But some people also didn't care. They were like, whatever. I'm going to keep my door unlocked. I'm going to keep my windows open because I'm not going to live in fear.
Well, that was one of the near misses that they talked about in the special was like a 9-year-old boy who heard somebody outside because the windows were open and went running to his dad, and his dad got up and went outside, and Richard ran off.
He saw the vehicle, right?
Yeah, ran off because that's the one thing. Like, he was very opportunistic, and he was okay with it if he was a coward. Essentially, like, he was okay with it if he got the drop on somebody. If he could strike fear into somebody and have the upper hand and the power that way, that was what he was going for. But if somebody confronted him, he was gone. He would leave. I think the lady with the shotgun, I think, was the only one, and I think it only because it was unloaded.
Yeah. She pointed at him and could not discharge it, and he shot her. So if it had been loaded, that could have saved her life and ended the confrontation.
Yeah. But there was one of his other victims, it was the couple that both of them survived. He shot both of them in the head, but they both survived. And the husband chased after him.
After he'd been shot.
And Richard saw. And honestly, I got to say, if I've shot somebody in the head and they get up and start running after me, I'm going to run too.
Pretty good indicator of what might be coming at you.
I'm not likely to shoot anybody, but that's definitely a thing to worry about. Oh my goodness, this guy I just shot in the head is coming after me. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, like, because he was being charged at, he fled.
Yeah, he also wanted some of his victims to swear allegiance to Satan. That was a big thing. The Satan element was very common reference for him.
Oh yeah, when he was burglarizing most of the houses with a victim, he would say, give me all the money, show me where the money is, show me where the jewelry is. And once he had it, he'd be like, now you got to swear to Satan that you're not holding out on me. He would make them swear that there was no more money in the house, or that there was no more jewelry, or something like that. Like,
it's amazing how much he obtained at certain times. In one case, $30,000.
Yeah,
made off with, and I imagine he burned through it in a couple of days with drugs. I mean,
very likely.
His every time he had a significant score financially, he would immediately obtain drugs, use drugs, and I guess become either more dangerous or less dangerous depending on how he reacted to the drugs, what drugs he had. I would think cocaine would have been a bad choice in terms of safety, but maybe something like heroin, he would have been kind of calm for a while. I don't know.
And that might have depended on how bad his teeth hurt. Like, if his teeth are really hurting, heroin, because that'll make the pain go away, and then he's going to be more sedate. But if his teeth are feeling okay, and he wants a ride, get on that cocaine or something else that's a stimulant, and it's off to the races.
I get a sense he had a preference for cocaine.
Yeah.
Although he certainly was, they call polysubstance user, equal opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe when he got a lot of money, he'd go out and buy candy. So then, like,
nose candy.
So he would, maybe his teeth would be hurting so bad because so much candy. And then he's like, well, great, I got these drugs too, so I can just make it go away.
Right. Well, when your teeth are rotting in your head, getting jawbreakers is probably not the best idea.
Yeah.
Maybe pixie sticks are better.
Something you don't have to chew at that point.
So the Netflix special really emphasized some odd angles. I think we talked about this before, right? About the police officers. Like, it was like, okay, I mean, everybody wants the backstory on a famous case, a notorious case, including me. I think it's very interesting. But there's always a limit in terms of, like, the backstory needs to be connected to the story. Right. So, like, for example, I was watching the RoboCop. That was one of your favorite movies. I was watching the RoboCop movies that made us. It was great. Right. And they were talking about the guy who designed the outfit. Like, they did the rough drawings and, I guess, the precise drawings, and they had to do molds or whatever they did. It was actually pretty cool armored outfit. I can't believe it took them that long to get him in there.
Yeah,
Peter Weller.
There were times, like, if they were going to be filming just from waist up, like, he would say, "Don't put the bottom stuff on," and vice versa. Like, and the gun coming out of the thigh, that was all prosthetic. That wasn't even on it. They just filmed from the side,
Right,
open it up, and it come out.
Yeah, that was amazing. But either way, right? So interesting, kind of behind the scenes on a I think a great movie, right? RoboCop, certainly a movie that changed movie history a bit. And so if you're interested in, like, the guy who did that drawing or what it's like to draw it, and then it's like, maybe there's a coffee cup in the shot, and you're like, tell me more about that coffee. And you're like, well, who made the coffee? What was their life like? Were they ever married? They have any dreams? You can get too far away from what's interesting, and that's what Netflix did with
That is part of the problem. Like, they went too much into the backstory of the officer. Like, okay, I get the pedigree of the officer. Like, these are the things that they did prior to becoming officer. But they went into a whole like, oh yeah, this is how he got on the homicide task force. Like, oh, they were at a restaurant. He said, yeah, why don't you be my partner? And then, like, the next day, like, the call, I was like, I wasn't pretty much in my cups that night. I'm not in my cups. I still think it's a good idea. Come on over. Like, do we really need to know about that conversation to know anything about Richard Ramirez? Like, I don't think so. Like, just the fact of this, he chose me to be his partner. Got it. You don't need the conversation that happened.
We didn't need the dramatic parts about that.
So it's a funny conversation, but
yeah,
it doesn't add anything.
No, not to Ramirez. And they also, I think, kind of glossed over some of the massive failures. And that's what happens, right? When you're doing a documentary, in a sense, there's a temptation to be a little friendlier in terms of your story to the people that you're interviewing, right? Unsolved Mysteries did this a lot because they used the victims' families as actors, and they were horrible actors. But they would be very sympathetic, and they would leave details out, like certain predilections that victims might have. They would leave that out of Unsolved Mysteries. You never heard about, like, any type of desires for sex and drugs. You didn't hear about that. So I think when you interview the police, there's a tendency to be like, well, they're helping us out. They're being interviewed. They're telling us all these backstories. Let's take it easy on them. Yeah. But they really screwed up. There's no escaping that. I mean, they should just be honest. I mean, it's a testament to a lot of things. It wasn't necessarily just their mistake. It was everybody. It was a group effort.
I mean, if you want to make it, a Netflix series about, the cops that caught the crimes, the cops that caught these guys, and focus on the cops, and you're like, okay, so this is the guy, and we give all this detail. Like, those are things that are really going to add flavor and story to it. But it's called The Night Stalker.
Right. Don't expect Squid Game numbers from that.
Right. It's supposed to be the Night Stalker. It's supposed to give you more insight into Richard Ramirez, but it really doesn't. It was really focused on the investigators.
If you blinked, you would have missed the history of Ramirez.
Yeah.
I think it was at the beginning of, I forget what episode, like maybe 3 or something.
Yeah, it was like the 3rd episode before they're talking about
a childhood picture, and that was it. You're like, what? Wait, what happened? You rewind. What was that? Like, that was Ramirez was born. Now moving to Los Angeles, 1985.
Ramirez was born. Family life was terrible. And then he started killing people.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Bob and Bill over in Petty Crimes. Like, they were hanging out one day.
3 episodes later, back to Richard.
Back to Ramirez.
When every time that we mention Netflix, it reminds me of a Saturday Night Live skit, and it was about Netflix apologies, but they were talking about how they're going to rebrand Netflix, so they like change it to like Flickster and whatever else, and then one of them's like Nutflix, and you're like, so spell it the way we're talking about. Don't spell it any other way. It's exactly what you think it's going to be. So don't spell it that way. And so every time I hear Netflix now, all I think of is Nutflix. And I think of Jason Sudeikis saying, Nutflix, introducing Nutflix, and the whole apology around it. I recommend that skit because it's just the amount of apologies they have to make after they screw up one thing, and they just end up combining all of it. It's like Flickster, Netflix, Nutflix, Flickster, you know. So I recommend it. If you haven't seen it, I think it's just, we have it. Netflix apology on SNL's. That would have been like the early teens, I think, late aughts maybe. But yeah, I recommend it.
All right, yeah. So Ramirez definitely he had a lot of variety in his tactics, and then eventually we see that he was steel cars. I think he favored Toyota.
I believe so. Yeah.
The quality. It's just the build quality, even back then. Yeah. But he got caught one time and I guess fled, and there was a fingerprint. And eventually, through kind of a convoluted situation where he goes to Arizona and comes back, he returns to LA and realizes that he's being sought after.
Right. Well, one of the big things that they did make clear in the Netflix special was actually interesting, was that he spotted the cops. Like they were dressed in their ratty clothes. They were, doing a good job blending in, but their teeth were perfect. And Ramirez noticed their teeth immediately, and that they didn't have the same odor. So he realized, like, they're not street people, and he turned and walked away.
Was that the same thing with the shoes? And you would notice that like the shoes were too good. This might have been a reference to something else, but I think I've heard that before as well. Like everything else good except for the shoes or the teeth or the smell. They didn't have the whole complete package.
Speaking of shoes, that was one of the big things the cops had was the shoes.
The Avia shoe.
11.5 Avia shoe.
And there was a black one and a white one. And there's so many of the black one that were made and delivered to this area, but I think there was only 6, I believe. I might be getting the numbers wrong, but there was only 6, but then they were able to narrow it down to maybe 2 to this specific area, something along those lines. Very specific.
They kept finding it at the crime scenes, right. These very distinct shoe patterns, like the tread patterns.
Could have been us.
It's a major thing.
But he was tipped off by a politician, I believe, right?
That's right. Yeah. That was later. Feinstein went on TV and said, "We know the killer's wearing this." So according to Richard later, like Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, that's right, off the bridge. Right,
threw him off the Golden Gate Bridge.
He made sure they were going.
Yeah. Threw him off the bridge. Stopped wearing him. But that was at more than half of the crime scenes. There was that distinctive tread pattern. The cops were like, "We know this guy is wearing these. We get him, or we get these shoes. We've got him linked to every single one of these."
So even though there wasn't a pattern to his crimes, age or place or gender or how he committed the crime, they had the shoe print, and because of how specific it was and how they knew that it was not widely distributed in that area, they had at least something to go off of that connected them. And so, yeah, of course, when Feinstein gave that detail away, he got rid of the shoes. They're like, well, how are we going to find it? How are we going to relate these cases now if we don't have this one thing that we've kind of been relying on? Maybe not relying, but it's been a significant factor.
And investigators were mad.
Mm-hmm. That was a huge mistake. Yeah, but anyway, they finally did identify him, and we see the whole scene where he's kind of chased down in the street by a crowd.
He was going from car to car trying to find one that was unlocked, which that speaks to kind of the way he picked his victims too. Like he just went from house to house trying to figure out which one was the easiest one to get into.
Yeah, some he would stalk for a little bit, but he didn't have much of an attention span. Seemed like it was really woven in with his drug use. He'd get high, he would patrol, he would find people regardless of age and gender. He attacked men and women together. I don't know if he ever attacked a house with only men.
I don't think
I don't
so.
remember that. I think it always had to be at least one woman.
Yeah.
I don't think it was ever more than two adults.
He liked to enjoy the assault of the woman as well.
Right. Yeah.
Or kid.
But most serial killers who are trying to do that would not target a house with a male, worried that there would be more physical resistance.
And Golden State Killer did.
He did. I think he actually enjoyed.
He started doing it. Yeah, Golden State Killer started doing it because there were men there, because then he could have control over both of them, and that was part of the thrill for him. Yeah. But that was going on right around the same time, and we know Richard Ramirez really looked up to like the Hillside Stranglers, and like, I'm pretty sure that he would have been all over Golden State Killer.
Is it Joseph D'Angelo?
Yeah, Joseph D'Angelo. Yeah. But he wasn't known about that until what, 2020 or 2019.
It was the genetic genealogy that actually got him,
which is fascinating.
It really is.
Right.
Yeah, well, especially it's perfect for a case like that, where that was just cold. They were never going to get him.
Yeah.
And the technology came through, and I think I believe he's still alive.
I think so.
Yeah. And he was in prison for like life.
Yeah. I mean, they found him.
I don't even think the trials happened yet.
I thought he was sentenced.
I think he was sentenced. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't long ago, but they caught him, and then there was like a delay.
I think he pled guilty.
Yeah. I think he even apologized.
That's right.
Yeah, he did.
There was a...
Yeah, he gave a really lame apology.
Yeah, it wasn't a good apology.
It was not a good one. Basically, he apologized for getting caught. I'm so sorry that I got caught.
He probably really is.
Yeah.
It's interesting because neighbors described D'Angelo as a very kind of like strict and temperamental neighbor. Like they didn't want to be around him. It was like nobody on his lawn, nobody, whatever, that type of thing. Wasn't exactly trying to lay low.
Right.
I guess he figured there's just no chance to get caught.
But he did the same things that Ramirez did. Like he would, just walk into people's homes.
Yeah.
Especially when where the windows were open.
He would ride a bike. He would ride a bike up to like through a bike path to where, so when he escaped, he could get to his vehicle, and the police couldn't chase him through the woods, whatever. Like he thought it through. But yeah, he definitely picked homes.
He was a lot more methodical than Ramirez, but I think that might have been one of the things that, like, Ramirez had his background in the Peeping Tom stuff, and then hearing Golden State Killer news stories would have been intriguing for him.
Well, look at the ramp up, right? Like D'Angelo, he ramped up to very sloppy public, like in the street crimes, just walking up and attacking somebody. He went burglary and worked his way up to that, but it was over a long period of time. Ramirez just snapped after committing a string of burglaries and car thefts and committing, having drug possession and using drugs, to going on this time-limited spree. Although I think he would have done it until he died.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they had to catch him. Yeah, so I know sometimes I'm hard on the police, in terms of like what they do, but I can't resist this one, right? So the people are beating him up, right? And the police are furious. They're like, "Hey, that's our job.
It's our job. We're supposed to be the ones beating people up." Especially since Richard Ramirez was a member of a minority group. Of course, he was being beaten up by other members of the minority group because he was trying to lay low, so he ran into a Latino neighborhood to try and blend in.
Right. Maybe he thought he'd get
That's
some
kind of the
sympathy
worst
there.
thing to do.
Yeah, they definitely apprehended him, and they almost delivered their own brand of justice.
He got struck in the head with a metal pipe several times.
It's amazing he survived.
Yeah. I mean the shots of him being just put into the police cruiser. He's got bandages all around his head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the citizens of California figured that would be quicker. Right?
We're going to save the state money.
Yeah. They were almost successful, but as it turns out, he would be convicted 43 different crimes, 13 for murder.
5 attempted murders.
Yeah, incredible. Incredibly devastating. And I think he had hepatitis C And then of course the B cell lymphoma is what actually killed him. So he had some physical problems in prison. He died in 2013. So relatively recent compared to where the story starts in 1960.
Right.
Yeah.
We had mentioned before about the dentist and dentist office mishap, and so the dentist. And I might get the details wrong, so feel free to add in here. But the dentist recognized, or they came to the dentist or something. But either way, it was recognized that Richard was the killer. They didn't know who it was, but was going to be there, and so they had this button installed. The dentist would press it, like whenever he comes in, like press it and we'll be right there. I was pressing it, and cops didn't hear anything. So then I talked to the dentist later and they're like, hey, why didn't you press it? You're like, I did. Turns out it wasn't installed correctly. So he was there. What button wasn't installed correctly? And that really huge missed opportunity there could have gotten him at that point, if not for that.
Like I think the investigators at that point had learned the first name.
It was the first name, okay.
Richie, I think they kept hearing Richie.
Okay.
And,
that's right. He used a pseudonym or something. Yeah.
And the dentist had some suspicions, so I think he reached out.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I've got this client, named Rich, and they were like, Eureka!
Mm-hmm.
We got him, and they went in like he would come in semi-regularly again because whenever the tooth pain hit, and he's like, I've got him set up for he's supposed to come back at some point in the next couple of weeks to get this, taken care of. And they're like, all right, well, we'll post some people nearby and we'll put this alarm system in. It's a silent alarm system, so all you have to do is push the button. And they go past the day that the dentist said that he was supposed to show up. They had nothing. A couple more days go by and they got nothing. And they contact him like, hey, why? What happened? And he's like, what happened? What do you mean? He didn't come in? And he's like, no, he came in. He was there, and I was jamming that button.
Why weren't you guys there?
Why didn't you guys show up? And they went in and looked, and like the primary investigators, the homicide cops were super mad.
Yeah.
And because that was something that was installed by not them.
I would think that considering how much money they spent of taxpayers' dollars to hunt Ramirez, it was a huge expenditure. Why not take a uniformed officer and have him dress up in a suit and tie or whatever, sweat clothes, and just sit in the, like they didn't have any good leads at that time.
Right.
That was actually a high quality lead. Just have him sit there. Pick somebody like really physically capable. So just one person, give him a gun, whatever, sit in there. His job is to tackle Ramirez and call for help.
His job is to sit there and read magazines until Ramirez comes through the door and then tackle him and call it in.
I mean, they could have even done it with like some intern or something like that.
At least intern, put the intern in there.
I need you to just sit there, be alert, and somehow call for help. Or stand up, walk outside, use a phone. Whatever it might be.
I'll tell you, our internships would have been way more interesting if we'd had to tackle people. It's like, okay, your intern. Your job is to tackle this guy when he comes in here. Why? What did he do? Oh, he's a serial killer.
Oh,
what?
Okay. So read magazines here?
So read magazines. I'm hearing read magazines.
That's all I'm hearing right now.
No. Tackle him when he comes through the door.
You got to remember that part. You can read magazines, but you got to remember the tackling part.
Can I do the crossword puzzles in tackle magazine? No. Just read the magazine.
That would be a valid question from an intern. Like, let me be very specific about what I'm supposed to do here. Can there be crosswords? Can there be magazines? Can I get up to get some water? Can I take a lunch break? All these things, like you're learning how to, do whatever it is you're doing, and you got to be very specific. Remember the tackling part.
How many bathroom breaks do I get? You're not remembering the tackling part.
You're missing the key detail.
So as far as mental health with Ramirez, you have the standard serial killer profile, perhaps antisocial personality disorder, perhaps narcissistic personality disorder. It's interesting, in this one, schizoid features were indicated, which to me did not fit at all with his grandstanding after he was arrested.
Right.
I don't see this as a schizoid at all. I think maybe, the head injuries and the drugs could have given that impression at one time.
I think heavy trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe just he wasn't talking a lot. Like, oh, schizoid.
Yeah.
And I wonder when this evaluation or an evaluation would have been given in reference to when he got arrested, but also in reference to the last time that he would have done drugs. So in other words, if he was coming down off of something, if it was that recent, or even if he got some kind of drugs in prison, or wherever he was at, which is likely, right? That maybe he was coming down off of something. Maybe that just played some kind of role in how he was presenting himself in that moment. That could have indicated something that wasn't typical for him. Well, based on what we saw in news clips and interviews and things like that, could have played a role in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that the diagnosing is very hit or miss, and especially back then. I'm not sure it's any better now, honestly, but very hit or miss. Who knows what he had? I mean, antisocial seems reasonable.
Yeah.
He certainly got started very young. That's required with that particular disorder.
Right.
Yeah, so that's Richard Ramirez. Right? There's a lot available on him in the Netflix specials. I think there've been some books on Ramirez as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's
a lot of books.
Yeah, the what you really see in the books is kind of like the backstories of a lot of victims, which I think can be interesting. And Netflix did a good job with that, kind of going through, like the relatives talking about the victims and
like the one was like the news media and everybody just talks about how a 60-year-old grandma, but they had her granddaughter. It was like she wasn't just a 60-year-old grandma, and gave some humanity to the victim, which that's really important.
Yeah, I think that was one of the better parts of that special.
I think you could say the same thing with the backgrounds of the officers, investigators. Long and drawn out for sure, and not really connecting to the story for sure. But at the same time, it gives a background it gives a perspective into like the home life of some of these people. That they were doing such a good job. Rather that they were putting so much effort into this investigation, and how much that impacted how often they were at home, how often they were with their family members, their kids, things like that. How often, just right in the middle of taking a nap or being with their family or whatever, they get paged and need to go in, and gives you perspective on just how disruptive it was sometimes for their family life. And even doing things like not getting a day off, working 7 days straight and just continuously doing that. So that was good perspective. And it shows them more in the light of these heroes, these selfless heroes that were doing this for the justice, doing this for other people, doing this for getting the bad guy and bringing him to justice and stopping him from continuing these murders. It could be the same. You could say the same thing for the victims, right? Not just a 60-year-old grandma, but someone who had a family, someone who had goals in life, someone who had values, things that they stood for, things they were trying to accomplish, and was taken from them, of course, by these senseless murders. And so that's what I probably appreciate the most about things like this is getting context to what we read. Because for myself anyway, when I list things for notes, it's like, here's a date, here's the age of the person, the gender of the person, and that's about it, right? But certainly we don't necessarily have the ability, maybe, or the time or something to go into a backstory. But that's pretty vital at some point to recognize how horrible it was and the life that was taken and what that person could have continued to be had their life not been taken. And the humanity of that is it's just so important, right? It's such a essential element to the story. And
serial killer victims get ripped off in that sense, right? In the fair coverage, equal coverage. Think about like Kristen Smart or Natalie Holloway, or the single alleged homicide cases we've covered. There's a incredible emphasis on the victim. Right. There's kind of character brought to that person's life. Like the details are filled in. Like you can get an image. Oh, that's what she was like, or that's what he was like. serial killers, I mean, like with Ramirez, there's so many we couldn't even go through them all. Like there's just like when we covered Ridgeway, like there's too many. But each one of those, like when I prepared for this video a long time ago, when I originally did this video, I found articles that followed up on each of those stories. Like each of those attacks were real people who went on and lived or didn't, and their story is there and would sometimes get updated. Like they're like, oh yeah, I was attacked by Ramirez 30 years ago, whatever it was. And you're like, wow, yeah, all these people were affected, but their individual stories get lost under he killed a lot of people. Not in court. In court, they go through each one.
In the general public, though.
Right.
General understanding of things. Because that's the one tie between all of them. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they are victims gets lost. But the officers definitely, some of their stories were very poignant and humanizing for the investigators. Like the one, the guy got home, detective got home from work and was like, told his wife, like, wake me up in an hour so I can go back to work. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, and they started arguing about it because she's like, you need to sleep.
Yeah.
You need rest. And he's like, just wake me up in an hour. And he goes to lay down. And like 5 minutes later, it's the office calls and he gets up and gets dressed and leaves. And because it had a huge impact on their family life. Now, I would argue that putting that much effort into it would diminish your capacity to be able to do the job. Like you're not sleeping, your brain never gets a chance to refresh and be able to see things from a fresher angle.
Yeah.
Like it is essential to take time to reset. Self-care is important. Mm-hmm. Self-care is how you are able to help more people. It's that old the airline safety warning, right?
Right. Your seatbelt first.
You put the oxygen mask on yourself before you try putting it on other people, because you need oxygen, and you can't help anybody else if you don't have any oxygen. So start with yourself, and then go to other people. And it's not about selfishness; it's about self-care. Mm. And I will never forget the one time I said that to clients at rehab. And one of them was like, I've never heard that before. Like I've never heard, he's like, I always thought that if I'm doing something for myself, it's selfish. But if you're resting so that you can be there to help someone else, it's self-care. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's not selfish to need to sleep.
Yeah.
It's not selfish to need to eat food. Like it's taking care of yourself. And you take care of yourself so you can take care of others.
Yeah, I think it just shows the officers did have an appreciation for how devastating one additional crime would be. Again, like a whole murder or two, depending on who his victims were, what house he went into, that would leave a trail of devastation independently. They really wanted to stop it. Mm-hmm. They didn't understand.
It's like arguably they might not have made some of the errors that were made and might have been able to catch him earlier if they hadn't been pushing themselves to the absolute limit. But they were doing it for the altruistic reasons.
Yeah. They're doing it for what they believed. They believed they were doing the right thing, and it was they weren't getting paid anymore. Well, they might have been, but it wasn't. It wasn't the money that at that point. They really wanted the guy. So I do think that this case reminds me a little bit of the John Orr. We covered the arsonist, John Orr, in that this is kind of like...
right, yeah, we did do that one.
It's a great case. This is one of those areas like kind of like the golden age of policing. You have like a Los Angeles cop. Now I say golden age, I mean, it's kind of facetious, like not to everybody, but from their point of view, they could do whatever they wanted. You couldn't get fired as a union.
I think they call it the good old days.
Right, good old days, right.
Very sarcastically often now, but
right,
the good old days.
Yeah, and that was part of what happened in this case, right? They roughed people up, and that's how they worked.
There was one of the stories on Netflix was about one of the cops. So they found somebody who knew Richard Ramirez, had run with him on the streets, and they'd picked him up and they had him in the interrogation room. And they're like, tell us where he is. And like, as soon as he realized who they were really after, he just kind of clammed up. He's like, I'm not telling you anything. And then one cop was like, "You tell me," and he snapped and just punched the guy right in the face, and like, I busted him in the chops, and then he started spilling his he started telling him everything. I'm like that's horrifying by today's standards.
Yeah, you wouldn't be a police officer anymore if you did that now.
Yeah.
But that was SOP at the time.
Yeah. And there were no body cams anywhere.
And like there weren't really cameras in the interrogation rooms either.
I think some, but I don't know about those.
There might have been some, but like I remember in the mid 90s when they did Lethal Weapon 3. And they mentioned like, oh, we put cameras in the interrogation room. Like everybody's like, all of the characters were like, wait, what? Like you put what? How could you're spying on us? Like it was a big outrage in that movie because they put cameras in the interrogation room.
You did a classic move where you have your club and you reach up and push the camera up, so you just can't see anything anymore.
It's like, oops.
Who did that?
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, there was definitely an ends justifies the means mentality for. Yeah. So we have quite a few questions today, right? It came in comments. There weren't a huge amount last time,
Right.
but quite a few came in. So we had to we'll take some and try to get to those next time around. Like we'll try to get to all of them if we can. Mm-hmm. We always do our best. So which ones do we have for tonight?
Yes, we had to limit them, and narrow them down. And we've decided we'll try not to take too long on each one of them. Otherwise the video might stretch out to 4-5 hours.
That's the goal.
That's half of it's questions, half of it's not, So, all right. So how close is Delaware to the description it received in Wayne's World?
Spot on.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing here.
I'm in Delaware.
I'm in Delaware.
Yeah. Delaware's like, it's like a suburb of Philadelphia. That's how I think of it.
Yeah.
But it does have its own independent identity. It's just not a well-defined, I don't know what Delaware really stands for.
Corporate tax haven.
Yeah. It's great for that.
No sales tax.
Yeah, no sales tax. The Monster Mile. We got Dover Downs.
The traffic isn't always awful in Delaware, compared to other mid-Atlantic and like New England states. I mean, traffic's not terrible.
I very often refer to Delaware as the suburban state. Like we are suburbs of everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're the suburbs of Philadelphia and Baltimore. Like they're both not that far away. But you can drive 45 minutes and get to Center City of Philadelphia. You can drive 45 minutes at a slightly different angle and be out in the middle of cow country. Like we are the suburbs of everywhere.
In about an hour, you can get to Lancaster.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I used to joke around with a kid I worked with at Blockbuster. He went out and got a tattoo of barbed wire around his upper arm. Not the entire way around because he skipped the underarm part because that was more painful. As soon as I got around to that bundle of nerves, he's like, no, stop, nope, done. But one of our other managers asked him, I was like, what does it mean? And he's like, what do you mean? It looks cool. And the manager's like, if you get a tattoo, it's got to mean something. You're putting this on your body for the rest of your life. It should mean something. And he like kept grasping for things. And he's like, the barbed wire stands for, the fact I live in the ghetto and, the man keeping me in the ghetto. I'm like, dude, you live across the street in Delaware. Ain't nothing ghetto here. Like, it might be suburban ghetto. like you only get the ice cream man once a week in the summertime to come around through there. But yes, there are some areas of Delaware that aren't as economically boosted up. And Wilmington is definitely not a safe city to live in general.
It's actually more dangerous than Philadelphia per capita.
Yeah. Actually, for a few years ago, they were going to film a TV series based on Wilmington, starring Jada Pinkett Smith. It got shut down. Yes, it got shut down because of the title. They were going to call it Murder Town.
Murder Town, USA.
Murder Town, USA. For commerce.
There was
I'll put it right on the billboards coming in or the signs.
There was an article in I think it was USA Today or something like that. That was titled Murder Town. Yeah. Murder Town, USA, where it talked about how Wilmington is number one most violent city amongst cities of similar size around the country, and like they were going to run with that for a fictional crime drama TV show. Like very smaller city, not a big city, smaller city, more intimate stuff going on, but we can highlight how dangerous. I think we're going to do like a lot of external shots and stuff in the city, and then all the internal stuff would have been done Vancouver or soundstage somewhere. And I thought it was a great idea. But then they'd be like, Murder Town. Like, had a bunch of people got really upset. You're calling Wilmington Murder Town. You're going to bring it down, especially the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up shutting it down. They were just like, no. Because they wanted that title. They wanted to use that title. They were dead set on it. Like they were like, you could change the name to something else and still come in and do it. Like, nope. That's the title.
Yeah.
Because that would have drawn people in.
That would have been interesting. I think I haven't been to the city in a while with the pandemic, but I think when you come in from one direction, there's a sign that says, "Is it a place to be somebody?" I think that
For
really
Wilmington?
is it a place to be somebody? Is that what it says? It's when you come in from the north, like on was it Governor Prince or something?
I don't remember seeing the sign, but
And you come in and say, I think it says a place to be somebody. I always thought that was really fitting for how little they're thinking things through, right? Like, just, I don't know, a place to be somebody. Like, I just like we're not even going to worry about making a sign.
But yeah, Delaware is just suburban everywhere. Like it is the suburban state, I think.
Well, where we live, I mean, there's also other counties. Kent is kind of like probably somewhere in the middle, Kent County, and then Sussex is farm country. So it's got a lot of variety in that way. But yeah, Newcastle County is is it like Coruscant in Star Wars is like a big city up the whole
It's like
planet.
the whole county is a city,
Right, it's
essentially.
it's like the suburb. Whole county is the
The
suburb.
whole county is a suburb.
I will add though that there's a lot of nice history in Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial history, but also history with wars and things like that as well. So there's history.
It's the first state.
It's the first
It
state.
is.
That's significant too.
It's the first state.
And we've got some significant people that have lived here or do currently live here. Bob Marley used to live in Wilmington, worked for DuPont. DJ
Jazzy Jeff
lives in Bear, Delaware.
I met him at Blockbuster one day. He came in and rented some movies.
There you go. So of course, Fresh Prince of Bel Air.
You're DJ Jazzy Jeff.
So lives in Bear.
He's like, yeah.
And he said, it's a perfect place because it's close to everything, right? Just like we said. Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Rec
She's
grew up
wonderful.
here. And George Thorogood, of course, and the Delaware Destroyers, now just the Destroyers, also grew up in Delaware. I'm sure I'm missing some people as well. But so some significance there for being such a small state, some significant
And Joe
people.
Biden lives here.
Oh, Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Yeah.
Right, that too.
Some significance. He did something.
Yeah, he has some job. I can't remember
I
what.
can't remember.
Yeah.
Some prominent.
Neither can he.
It must not. Yeah, it must not be too important.
He's got some prominent government job. Somewhere.
All right, so next question.
Sure.
So we'll have to limit ourselves on this as well, but what are your thoughts on removing Asperger syndrome from the DSM and just making it autism spectrum disorder in general?
Yeah, so we've seen kind of a movement, somewhat familiar with this, where there's an idea for some people who have autism spectrum disorder that to call it a disorder means that we're attempting to treat it, which means that it's bad. I understand the argument. I think what the argument really speaks to, I think there's an argument above that at a deeper level, which is this is how powerful the stigma of mental disorders is, where groups don't even want their condition, their symptoms to be called a disorder. I think the work we need to do is in normalizing having a disorder, not in eliminating something that can help us diagnose. Because with a diagnosis, somebody can choose to be treated or not. Right? So somebody comes in, that's confidential. We say, well, you have autism spectrum disorder. Somebody can say, you know what? Bury that chart. I never want to hear it again. I'm out of here. They don't have to. It's not like government troopers come in and take them away somewhere. Like, they have the freedom to get treated or not.
The men in the white coats with the butterfly nets don't
Right.
show up.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
in cartoons.
So I would say, I'm not a big fan of the idea of going through because here's what will happen, right? Eventually, every disorder or most disorders, and we already see a movement for other ones like this happening as well, like personality disorders. People saying, well, it's just my personality. Right. That's right. But the symptoms cluster together in a way where we can call it something, and we have research behind what tends to happen when you have that and what treatments may help you when you have that. It's really just to facilitate the research and treatment information. That's why we have diagnoses. It's not to say, oh, you're bad because you have this. That's not at all what we're saying. So I'm not a fan of the idea of just taking things out and kind of eliminating the ability to at least tell somebody, look, I think this is the symptoms you have tend to cluster together, and here's what they look like in other people in the research.
I think the person that made this comment, I think their point, if I remember correctly, was by removing it, it led, I think, to people who had previously been diagnosed with Asperger's to kind of be clustered together with other people whose symptoms didn't fully relate. They may have been on the opposite end of the spectrum. And so I think, if I remember correctly, they had said that it kind of led to the services not being as applicable, or some kind of decrease in maybe effectiveness, something like that. So maybe with Asperger's, it was able to be more specific, more of an understanding of this is more so what this person deals with versus other people that might be on a different end of that spectrum. At the same time, maybe somebody can make the argument, well, if you're going to have Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder, are you saying that there's no, that they're not the same thing?
Well,
That just so
Asperger's
different?
doesn't exist. That has been eliminated.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So maybe by...
Right, but if we still had it, would you be diagnosed with Asperger's disorder and autism
It's
spectrum
subsumed,
disorder? And
yeah.
and it would be it was subsumed into it because many of the symptoms tend to overlap. So it was enough of the symptoms overlap that we can just make it autism spectrum disorder with these additions to classify it as that. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's I don't think it's necessarily necessary to have specific terminology to separate out any one group out of any other group when the similarities in majority of the symptoms are the same. But to speak to the point about disorder, the word disorder, that goes back to the word normal, right? Normal versus abnormal. And a lot of people talk about, what's normal? What's that? It's all individual. It's to the individual person and their level of functionality. If having a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome helps a person to feel more secure in who they are and be able to function in a better way that is more helpful and healthy for them and their mentality, I say give them a diagnosis of Asperger, regardless of whether it's in the DSM or not. If it doesn't make much of a difference to their functionality, it doesn't really matter. Some people hold on to things, though. Like we become self-identifiers. Like that's a thing. I identify as that, and now you're telling me it's not a thing because it's now part of this?
Well, like multiple personality change to DID.
Right.
Yeah. And certain personality disorders don't exist anymore. Like a lot has changed, right? We have a lot of changes, and sometimes people can really get kind of attached to a diagnosis, but the names change. I don't know if it really, the symptoms don't change that much, but the way we understand, like the best way to categorize them so that they're statistically clustered together, that's all it really is. Well, we hope that's what it is. I don't know if the people who write the DSM always do a good job with that, but that's what they're trying to do.
I'm not sure about that either, but,
Yeah.
but meet the client where they're at. It's always the most important thing.
Yeah. All right, next question. Could you talk some more about science-based therapies versus made-up ones?
Therapies.
Yeah. So I don't know that there was any context on this one, but ones that are maybe more in the media or mainstream or something like that, versus ones that we
EMDR.
might actually versus ones we might actually use, or ones that like kind of get frowned upon by clinicians, I guess. A thought that comes to mind would be like life coaching and things like that. Obviously there's a lot of people who believe in that, both as a life coach and people who go to those kind of people. But in terms of science-based things, that's why we don't do things like that. That's why there's not a license for life coaching, because not really the science behind it.
Yeah, or doing anything.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think it's like things like mindfulness versus a spiritualist kind of things. Like mindfulness has some scientific backing. Like there've been brain scans of people who practice mindfulness regularly. Mm-hmm. Like we can see where it can impact the parasympathetic nervous system and how it can help to reduce anxiety and things like that. There's a lot of research into mindfulness practices. But then you have some of like the spiritual practices that kind of look mindful, and they'll use the term mindfulness in it. But then you end up with like 30 people in a tent with a, steam getting sick out in the middle of the desert.
Case.
Because we should cover that at some point.
That's an incredible case. Like that guy's still around.
Yeah. But that's they grab mindfulness.
James Arthur Ray.
Yeah. They grab they subsume kind of the mindful. This is not mindfulness and meditation, but it's more of the spiritual factors, like get in touch with yourself and figure out this. And like that's not therapy. That has there's no evidence behind anything there, and it's actually more dangerous than it is helpful.
Yeah, and the life coaches, I'm pretty hard on life coaches, but it's only because many of them encroach into our field. And I don't know what it is about counseling. Like if somebody had an interest in metallurgy, right? They wouldn't go, run off to some project, say I can build you a bridge, right? But if they like cars, they would say, well, I'm going to go, I'm going to make my own car in the backyard, like from scratch,
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to counseling, life coaches, some of them, not all, but some of them are like, oh yeah, that's nothing. There's nothing to counseling. I can do that. I can do it and I'm cheaper or whatever, or more expensive. A lot of times they're more expensive. Mm-hmm. Sometimes $1,000 an hour they charge. I've seen that. That's incredible. And many routinely charge $150, $250 an hour. So I feel like
I could charge that much.
Yeah, it's a pretty good rate.
I charge insurance companies, so I get what they are willing to pay me.
There's a reality to it, but I think that it's kind of circumventing the licensure laws. In some sense,
I think it is. I mean, people, the life coaches, like, I'll be honest, I've only met like one life coach in my entire career. And it's funny because the place I work with says counseling and life coaching on the front, but we've got 30-some therapists or 20-some therapists, and not a single one of them identifies as a life coach. They're all licensed. Either counselors or social workers or psychologists.
Yeah, it worries me too because certain professions, you're going to want someone who's licensed, right? Like if you went to a dentist and they're like, I got to tell you something before we start drilling here. Like, wait, is that like a DeWalt drill? Oh yeah, I can't afford the fancy water-driven ones.
I can't buy it. I don't have a license.
No. It's a Dremel tool. Don't worry.
It's a Dremel. I have all the bits. Look,
I've got all the bits. Of like, where's that key?
I may have just used it for a woodworking project. I cleaned it off pretty well. Don't worry.
It's not the. Don't worry. It's not the same bit. I changed the bits. I've got dental bits, and then I've got my woodworking bits.
Oh wait.
Wait, is it those that are those the woodworking?
It doesn't matter.
I'll spritz it down. Windex.
Yeah, so there's certain things certain professions where we demand a standard, and I think life coaches kind of snuck in and realized that not all members of the public, not all consumers of mental health services understand the nuances of licensure and certification. Don't understand or don't care. I think don't understand is more common, and life coaches are right there to move in. And they all say the same thing, like, oh, I refer clients who need that care. But yet, where are the referrals?
Right. I've never had anybody referred to me by a life coach.
Because why would a life coach do that?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, life coaches, we don't help people with mental health issues. We help people who just want to get their life on track.
They help people unlock their inner power.
Get them to self-actualization. Mm-hmm. Do you know what that term means? I heard it on I heard it somewhere.
It's when your inner power goes to max.
I heard it on a Tony Robbins interview.
That's right.
You put your inner power up to 11.
Yeah,
Crank it
someday,
up to 11, man.
someday we should cover James Arthur Ray, because I think he really epitomizes the concerns with. And he's a spiritual guru, but you could argue that they're all the same. It's all the same. Manifesting. Like if I want something, I don't work for it. I manifest it. Yeah.
Same kind of thing, like speak it into existence.
Yes.
And will it to happen, or whatever it might be. And, yeah.
I was just reminded of a Family Guy episode. Brian writes a book, Wish It, Want It, Get It, or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but basically it was like 2 pages of like a bunch of like uplifting positive quotes and things, and then like 90 pages of just like filling yourself. Like the topic was like, I wish it, want it. And it became a bestseller. Until he went on like a late night, and somebody was like, "Wait, what makes it different?"
Well, for a long time, Oprah Winfrey promoted people like James Arthur Ray and a number of other spiritual gurus. She was responsible for, was it The Secret? Like whoever wrote The Secret,
Oh, yeah.
that was promoted by Oprah.
The secret.
And yeah,
The secret is we just want your money.
yeah, that is the secret. Yeah. But it's, essentially the secret, I guess, would be if you want something, you can will it into existence. I'm simplifying them. Mm-hmm. But that was the secret. Like you can have what you want. You just have to believe in yourself and ask for it. And she promoted a bunch of other kind of spiritual gurus and I'll call life coach types. And I think gave them kind of a platform where they can now have legitimacy. And the Oprah effect is still in place, even though she doesn't have the show on anymore.
Right.
The book was Wish It, Want It, Do It by Brian Griffin. You can actually buy a copy of it on eBay or on Abe Books used.
Nice.
Does that mean it's filled in?
It's already filled in. But yeah, it's a few pages of just like positive psychology, like things, and then there's like 90 pages of just empty lined pages for you to write in.
Someday for our retirement plan, when we start the cult, we have to remember all these things.
Yeah,
we can put together our own book of affirmations so people can manifest things. But, they should manifest money back to us too, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
so if you manifest yourself $1,000, don't forget to give us $1,000.
Yeah. Well,
That's the only way it's
we
going to
gotta
work.
get our cut. I remember a Simpsons episode. They had a book like this. Bart got it because he got Mrs. Krabappel fired. So he used the book to help her open up a muffin shop. And like, because he felt guilty for getting her fired. And then like her muffin shop was open and she started doing well and making money. And he's like, I got to tell you something. I got you fired. And she's like, you little, like she was very angry with him because she just wanted to be a teacher. She didn't really want to do a muffin shop.
What's creative about that name is it's crab apple.
Yeah.
And they just changed the pronunciation.
Krabappel. I've been calling her Crandall.
Oh boy! All right, next question. So this was similar. What credentials should one look for in a therapist? So we've talked before about
Licensed.
we've talked before about the difference between mental health therapist, mental health counselor, clinical social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, but all of those have a version of licensure, right? A clinical license, and obviously that's something you should look for. Anything else to add to that?
I would just say look for the L in front of somewhere in their initials behind their name.
Yeah,
L for license.
I would say don't get caught up in necessarily what the profession is unless you have some specific reason to. The key is licensure. So whether it's a licensed marriage and family therapist, clinical social worker, counselor, psychologist. Psychiatrist is a little different, right? Because that's really for...
They're medical doctors.
Yeah. That's well, first of all, they're not really going to see you for therapy.
Yeah.
They'll see you for 5 minutes and throw drugs at you. If you're lucky,
Yeah.
you'll catch a few. Yeah.
Just open your mouth.
Yeah, that's right. It's just, so that's a little different. But in terms of therapy,
Here's our SSRI drug.
yeah, obviously we know the most about the counseling profession, but I think the other professions are very good. I don't think there's really much difference, especially if the person's been doing it, say, 5 years or more. I find they kind of converge. It's like they go to every storefront. They've seen every aisle. right? They pick what they like, whether it's strictly speaking, like was taught in their particular program or not, right? Like they find CBT, they find existential, they find MI, they find narrative therapy. It doesn't really matter where they started. They all end up in the same place. But I do, of course, have a bias toward the counseling profession because we, with our programs, we know we cover certain things. So right out of the box, a counselor is going to have everything that I think they should have to get started. And it's a humanistic base, right? The non-judgmental base, which all the professions really are, but we emphasize that. And of course, they emphasize other things, which are important too. But yeah, I like the counseling brand, but any practitioner with a license, that would be the key. Actual license. And there's a lot of stories. It's amazing, right? There's tons of stories when people sit down. I've heard them all. People sit down with a counselor. Oh, well, I'm working on my license. So are you licensed? Well, sort of. No, actually, I mean, either you are or you aren't. It's actually dichotomous. Now, there's associate licensure, which is technically still a license.
Still a license.
Yeah, but you either have one with no excuses, I call the no excuse license, or you don't. And there are so many unethical practitioners out there who will try to bill insurance companies. They don't have a license. They'll try to do private pay, but tell you that they have a license or tell you it's not important. Without the license, I don't really see the point because you have no idea what you're getting.
And the license is really important. There are fantastic clinicians who work for facilities that don't get their license because the facility has holds the license. Especially rehabs, like a rehab is doing the billing to the insurance companies, and you're just collecting a paycheck from your salary or hourly rate. So it's not as necessary to hold the license in those places, but I found that those places are kind of a stepping stone towards a licensure. Mm-hmm. You work there, as I did. You work there because you don't have the license to get the clinical hours you need in order to get the license.
Right. So the one exception is important to mention, right? You're touching on it, is that you could have a trainee, but that's fine as long as they're supervised by somebody with a license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they should disclose, and they do, I'm a trainee, I'm supervisee, working on my degree or working on my license. That's a lot better than somebody who has no license at all and is not being supervised, is not on a track. Because at least they're on their way. And actually, one could argue that, if there's a good supervisor in place, you're getting up to the date treatment. Like somebody's reading research literature and pushing that down to their supervisees.
I think another thing to add for credentials is that not every therapist is a generalist. Not every therapist is like, oh, I'll just see anybody with any condition or disorder. Some people have specific specialties and they only see people with that, or they're highly trained in certain therapies. And so that could be very important for some people. For somebody who's dealing with depression or anxiety and they're just, I'm really depressed, I'm really anxious. Okay. So maybe you can see someone who just kind of generally sees a lot of people. But so you guys know that I specialize in OCD, and you can understand OCD treatment, but if you see someone who's done exposure and response prevention dozens, hundreds of times with people in therapy, well, there's going to be a level of competence that might not come from somebody who generalizes in seeing a lot of different things. And so that makes sense. And so that's what I've built my career off of, building up that specialty, right? Mike, you're excellent in narrative therapy, right? You've done very specific trainings on that. So and I've referred people to you that wanted that specific therapy. They've heard about it, they like outcomes and the process of it. So that makes sense. You go to someone like yourself, and so that should be reflected in whatever you have out there about yourself. Like what I run into sometimes is I'll see someone on Psychology Today saying, I treat OCD, but I don't see anything else written about how they're going to treat OCD. If I had very bad OCD or any level of OCD, I'd want to know that person actually knows what they're doing, not just says, oh yeah, sure, I'll treat this, but has no idea about it. And so I think it's important to, if you're looking for something specific like that, or if you want to make sure the person knows what they're doing, it's important that you notice those kind of differences right? And recognize the kind of language that person might use versus someone that really may not know as much about it. And if they're trying to learn how to do it, okay, that's fine. But you should really make sure that you're seeking out someone who you have a high confidence knows what they're doing, so that you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting your money, you're not wasting anybody else's time or money, and so you're, most importantly, getting the best level of care that's going to ultimately help you and not do more damage, like it really could. And especially when if someone's going to do the opposite of what they should be doing, if the clinician's going to be doing the opposite of what they should be doing, that could really do some harm to somebody unintentionally, but nonetheless do some harm. So I think there's some important details one might need to look for depending on what they're actually seeking out.
Right. There is a level of competence that is part of the ethical standards of being any kind of therapist.
Yeah.
And training is one of them. We have to take CEs, we have to get a certain number of continuing education units over a course of period of time, regardless of what state you live in. Mm-hmm. In Delaware, it's 40 over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically 40 hours worth of continuing education over the course of that 2 years. So we have to maintain that. We have to continuously do those things. But right, like we all have our expertise, right? I spent thousands of dollars to go to England to learn narrative therapy. And I proudly say I'm a narrative therapist. I have the certifications to prove it. But I see other people, like you go to Psychology Today, and like just about everybody has narrative mm-hmm. written in their bios as a type of therapy that they do. And I'm like, where'd you get your training? And I guarantee you, in Delaware, nobody has that, other than the people that I've trained. Like, where'd you get your training in narrative therapy? Well, you gave me training last year, when I was working at Delaware Guidance or something like that. I'm like, okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
fair. That's fair.
You caught me.
Most of the other people will be like, oh, I read the chapter in the textbook when I was in grad school. Like, yeah, that's not the same.
Right. Yeah, on those boxes when you advertise, every major disorder is listed, and treatment protocol. I think people are tempted just to check all. I'm good at everything.
I think that separates, from my perspective, someone who's just starting
mm-hmm.
to someone who's a little bit more established.
Yeah.
Because it's very, right, you're right, it's very tempting at first. You're like, I want anyone in the world to contact me. I want this to succeed. I want my business to succeed, or, whatever. So it's like, I'll just check everything and I'll just make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you quickly realize that doesn't work. That's not a good way to approach things. You want your business to work, and that makes sense, right? You want to be able to see people, but at what expense? At what cost? And certainly, you don't want it to be the expense of quality treatment. Yeah. Very good. Next question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm wondering, what are your hobbies? So, hobbies. Mike, for 3D printing.
I like the boat there.
Yeah, we did. This is a good opportunity to talk about the two new additions to the 3D printing thing. Right here we have for Shayna Hubers. People voted. It's a ballerina. Made that one. And then for the Bluebell, people voted. We have a catch right over there.
Yeah, let's see if we bring this up.
Right in front of Dr. Grande.
It's even on the water.
And detail too, like it's slightly tilted a little bit as if it's sailing.
Yeah, that's great.
I just noticed tilted in the right direction too, with the wind.
That's right.
Going that way, it's tilted that way with the sail. That was good. Yeah. That was good.
Attention to detail.
Yeah, there you go. So 3D printing. What are your hobbies, Dr. Grande? I'm sorry. Mike, I'm sorry, Mike.
Like 3D printing, D&D movies, all of those kinds of things, geeky things. Spending time with my fiance and our pets. We have lots of them. Let's see, we have 6 cats now. 6 cats, a dog, 3 rats, and a horse. Not in the same house. The horse lives at a barn way about an hour drive from our house. All of the other animals are in the house, though.
That is a lot of animals.
It is.
Yeah. We only had 5 cats. We got one accidentally. Like, we were driving up to see the horse at the barn, and this little black kitten was running across the street and almost got flattened by 3 different cars going in the opposite direction. So we were like, we're saving this cat's life.
So it's very important to note the cat's alive, right?
The cat is alive. We
learned this from movies.
I turned the car around, and my girlfriend, she was girlfriend at the time, fiance now, she jumped out of the car, ran over, grabbed the cat out of the middle of the road, threw him in the car because he was terrified at the time, just clawing her hand desperately. So she just kind of tossed him into the car, and we went and tried to find medical attention for him, but the veterinarians are notoriously hard to get in to see on a Saturday morning. But we took him home, and he was flea-ridden. We gave him a dawn bath and killed off all the fleas, and he's now a member of our family.
Nice.
He was about 8 weeks old when we picked him up, and that was about 3 weeks ago.
Very good. So no kittens were harmed in the production of this podcast.
No kitten. And 1 kitten was saved in the production.
That's right. It's a net gain.
Yeah, it's a net gain of 1 kitten.
Dr. Grande, hobbies?
So I make videos. That takes a lot of time. Write books, working on next book. I like computer games. I don't really get to play too much anymore. But I like real-time strategies, turn-based strategy. What else?
You like cars?
Yeah, definitely like cars. I don't get as much time with them anymore, but certainly working on cars. I collect tools, which I intend to use at some point. Now, I've used most of them, but as anybody who's really into cars, your tool collection exceeds your projects by a little, right? Yeah, and at some point, soon I hope to get another vehicle. I hope to maybe trade in or sell the pickup and get a new pickup. I was thinking about the 22 Toyota Tundra.
Oh, okay.
But they're so backed up. Toyota's cut production 15% for November, and
they look nice though. The new ones.
It's actually a twin turbocharged V6 with an electric motor, like behind the bell housing, which is totally different than the drive motors on the wheels. So I'm very curious about it. But yeah, so anyway, I like vehicles.
Well, people were mad that the V8 wasn't an option, my understanding, but
yeah, me too. I would have rather a V8 with the electric motor behind the bell housing, right? Because the twin turbochargers are wonderful. It's free, it's like free power, right? Like recycles exhaust gas and all. But when they go bad, they're a nightmare to work on. I prefer the V8, but they're not going to make it anymore.
Yeah, the V8 just gives more power overall.
It's simpler.
In
right?
a pickup truck, that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, the V8s are simple and they've been around a long time. But I don't know. I mean, the way they engineer motors now, I mean, they're very reliable from the get-go. So we'll see. Ford's had good luck with their twin turbocharged V6, the 3.5 liter EcoBoost. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I always look at turbos as for diesels and for sports cars, not for like a V6 for in a truck, but
it's one dream thing I want to do to my cars, put twin turbos on it. That'd be sweet.
You can get a lot of horsepower out of anything with forced induction. I mean, I've seen. So I used to have a Lotus Elise a long time ago. It had a what was that motor? 1.8 liter 2ZZ Toyota motor, and it made something like 189 brake horsepower. There were guys who put a supercharger on that. Now there's a version that comes with supercharger. I think it was 218 horsepower, but you could put like a much larger supercharger, and I think some people might even turbocharge it, and you could get to 300 horsepower on a 2,000-pound car. Yeah. So, but the problem is forced induction. You pay a price in terms of the wear and tear on the engine. But yeah, someday I hope when I get out of this house into the next house, I can have a bigger garage, because right now I'm very limited by the garage space. That's killing me with the maintenance. My garage is stuffed with tools. There's no room for.
There's no pulling a car in there.
There's just a walkway with tools everywhere. And so yeah, next house, maybe a 2-car or even 3-car. Hard to find in Delaware. Delaware's not a 3-car garage state.
You go to Hockessin though, and
well, you go to Hockessin, you're spending.
In those neighborhoods, 3-car garages abound. But yeah, you pay for it.
You're spending money there.
Yeah, Hockessin, Greenville, that's pricey. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think there's some areas of the country where land is cheaper, where ranches are more popular. I like ranches, and 4-car garages you can even get. But in Delaware, it's tough to even get a 3-car.
Yeah, it's tough to get anything more than suburban in Delaware, as we mentioned before.
Yeah. I also want a huge basement for a bigger podcast studio. Yeah, that's my goal. Yeah. How about your hobbies,
Jeff?
Yeah, well, I like music. I like listening to it and playing it. So I play the drums. I have for since I was 12. I don't get to a whole lot anymore. I play at church, but when we had our daughter, when we had our second kid, that took away the second bedroom, the free bedroom, to be able to set stuff like that up. So that's that. But that's okay. Obviously,
you need a 2-car garage.
I have a garage, but it's not. It's not temperature controlled, right? And so I don't want to. I have like junk drums out there, but it's just not. I don't know. It's just not the environment I want it to be. Either way. So there's that. I like working on our house a lot. My dad was a contractor, and so I learned a lot of stuff from him, and so that stuff I enjoy. So it's kind of like I love working with people, of course, in counseling, but I also really love working with my hands, building things, and for me, the two can coexist. Like, I like doing that, but I also like counseling, and it just feels balanced. That helps me to feel balanced, I guess. So there's that. Of course, I love playing with my kids, playing with our kids, and doing things with them. And I don't know. I guess that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Very good.
Next question, Dr. Grande. What kind of dog is Bella? Now, we've you can hear Bella, the dog, barking sometimes.
Yes.
Of course, you have 2 dogs now as well. But
yeah, many times.
People have asked why Bella Grande Media.
Right.
Yeah, it's named after the dog. So yeah, we have 2. So Bella is a multi-poo. So Maltese and Poodle. So a lot of dogs are combined with Poodle because Poodles are intelligent and sturdy. Right? And she's sturdy. I'll give her that. I'm not sure about the intelligence on that one.
Well, she stands up on her hind legs really well. So.
Yeah, that's true. Greets us every time we come here.
And the other dog is a Yorkie, Maximus Decimus Meridius. We call Max. He's a newer. He's still a puppy. Yeah, he's smart, but
he's not going to get much bigger.
No, he's smart, but he's stubborn as well. So, but they're good dogs, of course. They bark sometimes when we're recording. What are you going to do? Yeah. They're trying to protect the house.
When we get a chance to soundproof better.
Yeah. That's their job. So yeah, the next house, I'm going to put soundproofing up everywhere. Yeah.
I should mention my dog, by the way, is a Chihuahua Fox Terrier mix. So, colloquially referred to as a taco terrier, which is funny. I have a picture from it last Halloween. My fiance got a taco costume for dogs, and we put him in it, and it's amazing. It's just funny.
Nice. How long before Max gets jealous because it's Bella Grande Media? Like, how long until he gets jealous? Why isn't my name part of this?
Demands to be on the marquee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, we could do a secondary channel, Bella Grande Max. Kind of like HBO Max.
Like,
yeah. when we make our own app for this, it'll be Bella Grande Max.
That's a good idea. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Do you guys like The Goonies, the movie The Goonies?
Of course.
That's a yes
It's
for
a
me.
classic.
Yeah. I like the Goonies.
It's a quotable classic. It's so many great actors.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not just like 80s actors like Corey Feldman, but had Sean Astin in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, fairly expensive special effects. The ship, the underground ship, whatever that was.
Right.
And of course, had Cyndi Lauper music.
Josh Brolin.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
had
can't.
Thanos before he became Thanos.
Yeah, pretty good actor. Yeah. So that was a good movie. I think pretty well directed as well. Like, it was well rounded. good tension. It built tension throughout that it kept.
I think it was a great movie. It's my childhood. Still watch it.
Finding ships. Spoiler alert for Goonies.
Finding pirates.
Yeah. All right. Next question. Are there any experiences you've had that you cannot readily explain personally or professionally? I really can't think of any. I don't. Maybe you guys can.
It's like the bear stories again.
Maybe. Maybe. Although we explained them.
Yeah, I mean, I think
they can be explained.
I think the question really is more along the lines of if you're had any supernatural experiences or things like that. And personally, in my youth, I used to fall into those kinds of like, oh, there's ghosts over here, there's ghosts over there. But as I've gotten older, I've let go of those kinds of beliefs just because I don't see any evidence of it. Like all the stuff like electronic voice phenomena. Well, that's pareidolia. Like that's the brain trying to find patterns in something where there is no pattern, because our brains are pattern-seeking machines. We're trying to find patterns in everything. And when we hear just white noise, we'll find it. If you expect to see something, or you will. And like just ridiculousness. My aunt is very much in and I hope she never sees this, but she's very much into the spiritual, and she very much believes in ghosts. And she was telling a story. She used to work in a school. She was a music teacher for years. And she said she was in the break room at one point. This is one of her eerie stories for her. She said she was in the break room, and she went to microwave something, and she pushed the buttons and turned away and came back and turned back, and the microwave said "child" across the thing, and nothing had happened. And like she found that really eerie. And as she told this story, I was just like, that's the child microwave, the safety lock on the microwave to keep children from doing things stupid with it. But it was like, oh my goodness gracious. And that's from what I've seen, the be all and end all of those kinds of supernatural things is people misunderstanding or misconstruing a natural phenomenon or something that is purposely designed.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever witnessed anything that would qualify as supernatural that I couldn't explain. I have had some amazing coincidences in airports, which you could still make a statistical argument for, like being on a plane with somebody you know and seeing people like walking through a terminal. That's happened to me a few times. I'm like, what? Like there's no, but I wouldn't call it divine.
Yeah.
It's just a massive coincidence. There does happen sometimes. And especially like there was a time when I would fly, relatively often. So, increase your chances and whatever. That's about it in terms of some pretty cool coincidences.
I guess the only thing I could include, so I'm Christian, so I guess you would include religion in that because you can't prove it. It's not like you can, here's scientific evidence. So I guess that's the only thing, right? And so, I mean, that's the definition of faith, though, right? Is you're going off something you can't prove, you can't point to something like here's definitive evidence. And I guess to an extent, it's kind of like, I know my experience and that's what I point to with that, right? So I guess that would be a personally unexplained thing, but something that I would say like, no, I know this. Well, how do you know it? Well, I just know it. Or, however that might go for somebody. So I guess that would be the only unexplained thing. Not that it's a ghost related thing or anything, but it's, unexplained nonetheless. I guess that's the only thing I could contribute to that. Anything else?
No, we don't have exciting lives when it comes to paranormal stories.
No, I guess not.
Never been chased by a werewolf or...
And not even a bear werewolf?
No, not even a werebear.
A man-bear pig?
Man-bear pig. No.
Next question. Top 5 mystery movies or shows?
Oh, boy.
Now, I'm not big on, like, mystery movies. So the only one I could think of was one I just watched last night. A Hulu show, Only Murders in the Building. Steve Martin Short.
I've heard that's pretty good.
Selena Gomez. It is. Like, we watched maybe 2 or 3 episodes or so. Really good. Yeah, unexpected roles for everyone in there. Selena Gomez, even just being with Martin Short and Steve Martin, like that's pretty unexpected to me. But yeah, really good. I would recommend it. But yeah, kind of this mystery thriller is actually revolves around a podcast. And so that's what brings these people together in this building. Stories unfold from there, lots of mystery. So I recommend that, but I can't think of 5. I could only think of 1.
Yeah, I don't know if are there that many mystery movies? I mean, you could think of like, was it called Knives Out? Was a mystery movie.
That was a great one. I was going to add that. Was going to be on my list.
Yeah, it's intellectually complex. Like it's well written. You know, it's impressively well written. Clue, which we've talked about before.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You know, but I can't really, unsolved mysteries, all of them, right?
Every unsolved mysteries.
Even with they're leaving out the things that could help solve the case. I did a video not long ago on the very first unsolved mysteries case, which was not even Robert Stack. It was Raymond Burr back then. It was a non-episodic release. It was a special for it was a year. So it was Unsolved Mysteries, had like some specials. Then they came out with the series, and then Robert Stack took over shortly after that. It was a case of Don Kemp. A guy went missing at an intersection in, I can't remember the state now, a rural state, like out in the middle of nowhere. It had a Bronco, Blazer. I think it was a Chevrolet Blazer. And he parked at an intersection and disappeared. Like that was it, just ran off. And his body was found like 2 or 3 miles, 4 miles from there years later.
Yeah, like 5 or 6 years later.
So yeah, something like that. Yeah, he just, I mean, it's a prairie. Like there was nowhere he could have gone. They had an airplane. Like they're like, we should have found him. Like there was no place. And when his body showed up, they're like, if he was there where his body was found, we would have found him because we searched there. Like there's no, like they showed pictures of it. There was nothing. You could see for miles. Like there was nowhere
Gotta remember that case.
to hide. Yeah. Pretty amazing case. Relatively simple. Like there wasn't a lot, backstory in it. But as it turns out, the guy, might have been delusional because he thought he was going to start a cult and usher in the apocalypse. We've heard all these things before.
We might even start one ourselves and do that. Right, yeah.
Beat him in his own game.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's all I can think of in terms of mysteries. I like a good mystery movie, though. Like when one's really well thought out, yeah, it's certainly interesting. I'll probably think of some later.
Okay, so, I like Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch. I think that was one of the best modern iterations of Sherlock Holmes. Or Sherlock Holmes, not Sherlock. Sherlock was the NBC American-made version. I like Sherlock Holmes. It was really well acted. Really great series. The original CSI for the first few seasons, I really liked. Because in the first few seasons, they were trying to stick to the science of the investigations and they were doing the whole wolf thing where they're like taken from the headlines of today, but trying to use the actual science behind it. And then later on, they just got like sensationalized with it. But I liked the first few seasons of CSI. It was great. And then Bones was another great show. Similar problem where they were really sticking close to the science at the beginning and then just got really ridiculous later on. Like super ridiculous. Like Knives Out and Clue are both great. But there's an underrated John Candy movie called Who's Harry Crumb? It's actually a great mystery show. It's a comedy, but it's actually really nice. It's a really good, wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, Who's Harry Crumb? John Candy, who's a great actor and sorely missed.
He really was. Yeah, I have a video about him I did some time ago. He had an amazing life and career, and then a tragic ending. But I mean, everyone has a tragic ending in a sense, right? Like,
yeah,
everybody's ticket gets punched someday, but he died prematurely.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's
All
it.
right, last question here. What are your favorite? What's your favorite car / vehicle?
I'll think about this guy.
So are we talking about like that I've owned, or if money was no object, what can I?
Both.
What would I
both,
buy?
both.
Okay.
Right.
Favorite car that I've ever owned. I think it's got to be the one I own right now, the 2018 Dodge Challenger. It's a really great car. Pretty quick, nice, responsive. I really enjoy it. But if money were no object, what would I have in my garage if I had a 12-car garage? Right, an Aston Martin DB5 from back in the day, the James Bond car, and probably one of the newer DBs. I think they're on the 12 now, DB12. Might be the most recent one. But the Aston Martin is one of my favorite auto manufacturers just in general. And 1968 Shelby Cobra Mustang GT350 or 500, either one.
Mm-hmm. Good choice. Yeah.
Nice. So I'll go with the same thing, Mike, with the owned versus want. I've only owned 3 cars, I guess. So it's just, I don't have a lot to choose from. But the first car that I ever bought was a 2012 Hyundai Veloster in an orange. It was called Vitamin C was the color. And a quirky little car. But I don't know. Once I saw it, I was like, all right, that's a cool car. Because, it's your first car and you're like, all right, I don't have a lot of responsibilities. Might as well, get something that I like. So this car actually had 3 doors. All right. So on the driver's side, it had a longer door, easy in and out for the driver. On the passenger side, it had 2 doors on that side. So one for the passenger and one for the seats behind. And that was certainly a quirky part about it. And so it was cool, and it had low profile tires, and it was a quick little car. It was, small, whatever. And so I was like, this is cool. And then I realized how low profile tires don't last as long as regular tires. So maybe you'll get 30,000 miles out of them if you're lucky. So I'm like, that sucks. And they're more expensive too. So I'm like, this is terrible. Why didn't anybody tell me about this? So strike one. Then I got this job. Actually, shortly after I bought the car, I got this job. And it turns out I was going to have to be transporting people sometime, pretty often actually, most of which were kids. And so I had to get car seats into this tiny little car. And it was
not the best car for that.
It was a terrible, terrible situation for this car. And so I was like, all right, this is not practical anymore. But it was nice. I liked it. It was a good introduction to my first car, that I had bought. And so I think I had that car maybe for a year, and then I had to go 100% practical, and 2012 Prius is one of the cars we currently have. So 100% practical, obviously very good on gas. So, all right. So if money, if I could have one that I would really like, I really love old trucks, and maybe trucks in general, but so I'm thinking a 1943 Dodge Ram. I don't know if it was Ram Charger or Dodge Charger, whatever it was, but it's I know they had a military version of it, but it's got the classic truck look. It's got the rounded hood on the front, these big aggressive looking tires. Usually they have, wood, pieces of wood on the back, above the bed, kind of that classic look with it. And I think maybe they even have a Power Wagon for that year, or right around that year. So I think just the look of it, and just kind of has the aggressive look, but also the classic look. So something like that. But and certainly some kind of fast car. I don't know if I'd get specific with that, but some kind of fast car, of course, would be cool, So I don't know if I have a lot of dreams for that, and I don't know a lot about cars either. But it's one of those things that in my mind is it'd be cool to have a nice car one day. Cool to work on a car, learn about it, whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
The Power Wagons are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were really well made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I like a lot of different cars, so my preferences change from time to time. I think I just made a video. I think it was my 800,000 subscriber video was about cars. But as far as what I owned, I mean, one of my favorites would have to be the Lotus. I had that for a while. It had R compound tires, so 8,000 miles is all you got. Ooh. And you had to be dead on with tire pressure, or they would wear funny, right? Because it was a special little car though, 2,000 pound, 6-speed, and the 1.8 liter Toyota engine and transmission. So it was easy to fix, but had Lotus pedigree. So it was light and quick. I think one of my earliest vehicles was a Dodge D150. I think it was a 78. I think the 3-speed on the column, no power anything, no power steering, no power brakes, no windows, nothing. AM radio. I think that might have worked. Heat. That model had heat, which worked. That was about it. That was it for features. Yeah. It was a slant 6 short bed with no extended cab or anything. It was just regular cab. Round headlights. It was great. In terms of dream vehicles, I like the new Lotus Emira that's coming out. I've seen a little bit about that. I think that's going to be the last gasoline-powered Lotus because everybody's going to electric.
Going electric.
I'm always happy with like an F-250 King Ranch diesel. Lately I've been looking at the GMC Yukon Denali XL. That's kind of a dream vehicle. They're pretty pricey, but before that, Land Cruiser. I think the GMC is actually bigger, but still like the Land Cruiser. They're not making a Land Cruiser for 22.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
You have to get the Lexus LC600, which I'm guessing going to be pretty pricey.
Probably.
Yeah. It's a replacement for the LX570. That might be it right now. Interest change. One thing I just kind of like to throw it out there. The Hummer, the new Hummer, I think it's EV.
Yeah.
With 1,000 horsepower. That looks interesting. Yeah. I think it's like $130,000. It's way,
way too expensive.
Way.
Well, they have a possibility of the 4-wheel steering on that one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So maybe the crab walk thing, maybe the super tight turning radius, So a lot of potential there and a lot of details in that one.
We'll have to see if they depreciate to my price range, like way down.
It all depends on how you're driving the vehicle, though. Because I remember this was years ago, I had a Dodge Ram. It was a 2003 Dodge Ram pickup truck, manual transmission. I think the only power thing it had was the power steering.
That's all you need.
Yeah. Power steering. Had the ABS, but that's standard kind of thing. So the radio worked, though. Radio did work.
Well, that's good.
Everything else was manual. But there was a Hummer. It was snowing, and a Hummer went off the side of the road into a ditch. Couldn't get out. So I stopped, and with my little 6-cylinder Dodge pickup truck, pulled him back up onto the road. I'm like,
was that the real Hummer, or was that one of the ones like?
I think it was like an H2 or something like that.
Yeah.
But still, the
original Hummer was incredible.
Yeah,
it was a modern marvel. Yeah, but after that, it was basically just a big SUV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose like it had the big 4x4 badges all over. It's like 4x4. I'm like, you can't, and you're stuck. Like, all right,
use those badges to get you out.
Right? Yeah. So speaking of badges, my dad's huge into Jeeps, and a bunch of his friends are as well. And as a gag for one of his friends who's not doing as much off-roading anymore, he asked me to print badges for his car, his Jeep, that says mall rated instead of trail rated. So I printed these things and I painted them so that they look identical. I put some double-sided tape on the back and gave it to him and said, just make sure you send me pictures.
That's good.
Yeah, we don't really use, like with 4x4, like I have the Dodge now, and I have an older Highlander, a first gen, which is all-wheel drive, not 4x4, but it works the same in snow pretty much. We don't ever use that. I mean, I think I've used the 4-wheel drive 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. The all-wheel drive in the Highlander is always on, so I guess whatever, using it every time. But in terms of needing it, it's very rare.
Yeah.
Delaware doesn't really have snow too often.
Or hills.
Thankfully. Yeah, or hills.
Right.
Yeah. I think the speed bumps are as much as we get.
That's our version of a hill.
Yeah.
That's about as high the elevation. I mean, other than, maybe you get close to that highest elevation point over speed bumps.
If you go fast enough, you do.
You can see half the state. All right. So that was the last question?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
good. All
Yeah,
right.
so keep them coming. I mean, that's, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to as many as we can. Any final thoughts about Richard Ramirez before we wrap up?
Oh, yeah, that's the case we were doing.
Oh, right. Why were we here? Final thought. You got anything, Mike?
No, I'm still trying to figure out what kind of mini I want to do for this particular case.
Oh, that's a good one. Could you do a set of teeth or something?
Like
Nasty
I
teeth,
could do
maybe?
a set of teeth and just smack them and break them up.
That's good.
Or sneakers. I could do a pair of
Sneakers,
sneakers.
yeah. In terms of final thoughts, I mean, he's, it was just all over the place, right? With who he would terrorize, who he would kill, and one thing I don't know that we talked about a lot, when he would assault female and male victims. There were some young male victims that he assaulted. His odd patterns, not even a pattern, but just his odd behavior. So the one in particular, I forget the age of the girl, but young girl, took her from her house, drove somewhere, and she had a request, like going to the bathroom, for example. She just continuously said, like, I need to go to the bathroom. And he just he stopped, and then he took the bath, and then just kept doing that. So he didn't maintain the same, like he would kill people, right, and just be careless about that. But when they had a request for something, sometimes, he'd be like, oh, okay, Or even the one, he had shot the woman and then shot the woman's roommate, and then saw her again, and she said, you already shot me once, don't shoot me again, or something like that. He didn't shoot her again.
Yeah, he just walked away.
Right, and he's like, and I don't even think he ran. I think he just literally walked away.
Walked away.
And it just so abnormal. So no sense of like that this guy had any continuous thoughts or any. He wasn't even thinking the same way during all of the crimes or something like that. It was just so weird. And so I'm sure that stumped police so much more than anything else. They just couldn't figure this guy out and what he might do next. So I don't know, just odd lack of patterns.
I think that lack of pattern was driven by the impulsivity of everything.
Yeah.
I think he, like, unlike other serial killers who kind of, they had their patterns, they had their set. Gary Ridgway, like, he knew exactly what he was doing. Like, he was able to get away with it for so long because of who he was choosing to go after, the method in which he chose to go after them, and the method of disposal and things like that. Richard Ramirez didn't think about any of that. Richard Ramirez thought about, hey, I'm going to go in there. And I'm going to terrorize these people. Like, he didn't even think about how he was going to do it. It was very impulsive and emotional. Like, we talked about the one woman who had the shotgun. And like, I think one of the few times that he took anything with him that he kept was that case. Like, she pulled the shotgun. He shot her in the head, and then proceeded to stab her and mutilate her, and then took her eyes and put them in a music box and kept them in a music box. One of the few times he took something other than money from the home. Mm-hmm. But he would stay in homes, like, snack.
Right, he would eat, right?
He would have snacks. He would watch TV. He would leave deposits in the living room. It was all impulsive. I can't think of another serial killer who was as impulsive and driven by impulse as Richard Ramirez. And
got away with it so many times. Like, you see single, like that with serial killers, but like single homicides, or maybe somebody commits one then another, that erratic, they get caught right away. But to get away with it for he had 13. He was convicted of 13 murders. It's incredible.
And he was definitely interested in others, in other serial killers, and other killers in general. Like the one of the investigators, we talked about it earlier, that one of the investigators had been on the Hillside Strangler case. When they finally caught Richard and brought him in, they said they wanted to get him to cooperate and talk about things. So they said, we're going to do you a favor. We're going to put you in the same cell that we put the Hillside Strangler in. And he's like, really? They got excited about it and was happy about it. And like wanted them to tell him more about the Hillside Strangler. And that's how they started to build rapport with him so that they could get him to talk about things. And it worked. Like, he definitely had his people he looked up to and tried to follow their example, I guess, but then it was just impulsive in how he did things. And I think the erratic nature of his impulses driven by substances, various types at various times, really pushed him in different directions for how he would do it, when he would do it.
Yeah, you think about like, I think sometimes with killers, when they get loose, people take comfort in the fact that maybe they're not in the demographic, like they're too old for the killer, or the killer's looking for females and they're male, or the killer operates in one geographic region, they're in another. Ramirez drove stolen vehicles all over LA.
And San Francisco.
In San Francisco, he picked neighborhoods at random, any age, any gender, any time, mostly night, but he had a wide range of night times in the night that he would choose, and there were other attacks. He was just like a guy walking around that could kill anybody. And he would invade, which very few serial killers go into someone's house. They usually catch people out in the open, not climbing through a window. It's very rare. Yeah, so I would think these days with cameras and more technology, Richard Ramirez could not exist. Nobody could get away with it that many times these days. So
I don't think so.
Fortunately,
especially not with the level of like security systems we have today. I mean, yeah, you can get around. There are ways of getting around them, but the Ring camera is just
that alone,
could catch him, and then just all sorts of different ways. And social media would get somebody.
Yeah, we heard noises. People would hear noises and come out. Now they'd have a phone recording it. Like just it's changed. Yeah, he lived in a time and an area where that was probably one of the last times somebody could do that, and he did it. So, terrible killer, but an interesting one. I'm glad we covered because I think he's like an important killer in the history of true crime. It's important to understand his case. He's a reference case that you compare to almost any other serial killer. So that's where we'll wrap up. That was Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and this, of course, was an episode of the murder part. Mike, you talked about what potential items?
Yeah, like sneakers, I think would be one.
Okay.
And possibly like messed up teeth.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, second, messed up dentures or sneakers.
Very good. So put your vote for that in the comments, and any other comments, any questions, again, we'll try to answer. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. We'll talk to you soon.